Chapter 1198. The extreme wilderness mainland was a continent on the same level as the eastern wilderness and the young wilderness mainland. Over the years of capture by the tens of millions of sages, many gods have been placed here. The number of gods was about the same as the blood sacrifice in the young wilderness mainland. In other words, it wouldn't be long before the sages could blood sacrifice these gods. Once all these gods were blood sacrificed, the extreme wilderness would be revived. By then, it would be a huge blow to the god realm. Among the tens of millions of sages, most of them were currently traversing the continents of the god realm, capturing gods. Hundreds of thousands of sages were patrolling the extreme wilderness mainland, looking at the gods that had been captured. On this day, all of a sudden, they felt ripples appear in the void. Then, some of the sages saw some gods vanish into thin air. What's going on? Seeing those sages suddenly evaporate, some of the sages were immediately stunned. When they came back to their senses, they flew out and spread their powerful divine consciousness. However, wherever they passed, there was only an empty continent. Were there any gods? Could it be that someone had taken them all away? This thought appeared in the minds of many sages. However, they told themselves that in the god realm, even the ancestral sages didn't have the ability to take away so many gods at the same time. So where did they go? Everyone was shocked and began to report the matter. However, at this moment, an extremely strong aura of death enveloped their hearts. Before they could react, their bodies and souls had already shattered with a bang. Almost at the same time, in the continents of the god realm, regardless of the level of the sages, their physical bodies and souls exploded at the same time. They died on the spot. Instantly, the entire area was shrouded by dense blood clouds. Blood-colored lightning danced wildly, and blood rain poured down in torrents. A sage had fallen. For such a phenomenon to occur, what else could it be other than the fall of a sage? In an instant, all the gods in the god realm were stunned. After the initial shock, they became excited. This was because they knew that someone had made a move. Someone had killed a sage. However, who had the power to kill so many sages in an instant? The sacred world. In a special room, there were originally tens of millions of soul jade slips densely packed together. They were the soul jade slips of the saints who had descended to the lower realm. At the same time that the deity world sage fell, the tens of millions of soul jade slips shattered at the same time. This scene immediately shocked the humans and demons of the saints' world. Immediately, the important figures of the two clans gathered together and summoned an undead saint who was guarding the soul jade slips. Are you sure those soul jade slips exploded at the same time? A monster race big shot looked at the undead saint with a gloomy face. Sir, those soul jade slips indeed exploded at the same time. That undead expert's face was still pale from fright. They were not frightened by the great figures of the two races, but by the death of tens of millions of saints at the same time. Who has the ability to kill tens of millions of saints in the entire area? The important figures of the two clans all frowned, their killing intent surging. Could it be that someone is controlling the god realm, using the power of the god realm to kill all the saints in an instant? A major figure of the human race asked hesitantly. Impossible. A powerful figure of the Yao clan immediately denied. How could the god realm be controlled? Since ancient times, no one had ever been able to control the god realm. Everyone thought that the god realm could not be controlled. Before Morong Yu took control of the god realm, they also thought so. In fact, if Morong Yu did not become the enforcer of Huaxia's cultivation world, if he did not coincidentally take control of the immortal world, he would never have thought of controlling the god realm. We must get to the bottom of this matter. My intuition tells me that this matter has something to do with Morong Yu. A big shot said with a gloomy face, his eyes filled with killing intent. The teleportation array leading to the god realm was not damaged. If it was really Morong Yu who did it, he would have destroyed the teleportation array and repaired the spatial passage at the same time. Could it be that the god realm changed? Whether it is related to Morong Yu or the change in the god realm, no one can stop us from reviving Huang. Otherwise, We will kill without mercy. The two big shots of the two clans were filled with killing intent. Then, was it Murong Yu who killed the saints? The answer was yes. After Murong Yu took control of the God Realm, he only needed a thought to kill one of the experts in the God Realm. However, before his soul mutation, he would need to exhaust a portion of the God Realm's origin energy to kill one person. However, after his soul mutation and his strength increased, the consumption of origin energy became insignificant. Because when his strength increased, the origin energy of the God Realm also became larger and stronger. The stronger the origin energy of the God Realm became, the stronger the God Realm became. The space of the God Realm became more stable. In the past, Heavenly King Realm deities could break the void with a punch and create spatial turbulence. But now, even Heavenly Emperor Realm experts could not break the void with a punch. At the same time, the barrier of the God Realm was many times stronger than before. The origin energy of the God Realm and Murong Yu, the master of the God Realm, were complementary existences. A single thought to kill a saint. In Shenzhen and Shenzhen's allies were all looking at Murong Yu in shock. Because they all saw Murong Yu only say one sentence. This time, I don't need any of you to do anything. I can do it alone. Before he could finish his sentence, blood clouds started to appear all over the God world out of thin air. That was the phenomenon of a saint's death. Shock. Shock. No one was more shocked than them. What was a single thought to kill a saint? They felt the same because they did not see Murong Yu do anything. Holy Lord, those saints were killed by you. Zhang Ao stepped out and looked at Murong Yu in shock. His voice trembled as he asked. Murong Yu nodded slightly. Hiss! Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. They were so shocked that they felt dizzy. I'm the master of the God Realm. No matter who it is, as long as they enter the God Realm, as long as I wanna, I can kill them. Moreover, it is more than 1,000 times harder for them to enter the God Realm now. Murong Yu said calmly, but killing intent flashed between his brows. His hatred for the humans and demons of the saints' world had reached the limit. Although they were all humans, the humans of the holy world wanted to destroy the humans of the God Realm. This was a great hatred that could not be resolved. Holy Lord, aren't they setting up a teleportation array? I wonder if you've destroyed that teleportation portal? A big shot from Glory's sect asked, trying his best to contain his shock. Murong Yu smiled. Why would I destroy that teleportation array? If I destroyed that teleportation array, how would they enter the God Realm? Everyone was taken aback for a moment before they came to their senses. Smiles appeared on their faces. Murong Yu did not destroy the teleportation array and allow more saints to descend. His goal was very simple. He wanted to kill as many saints as possible. He wanted to kill until the saints were too afraid to descend. Only then could he intimidate the people of the God Realm. Otherwise, if he destroyed the teleportation array now, the people of the holy world would set up a second one or even more. Murong Yu did not have that much time to play with them. All right, everyone rest assured and cultivate. Try to break through to the saint realm as soon as possible. As for the saints of the lower realm, you don't have to worry. They can't harm the God Realm. Murong Yu waved his hand and ordered everyone to retreat. Everyone quickly retreated, but Zhao Jiqing and the other four stayed in the holy palace. Murong, you were kidnapped halfway through the ceremony. Shouldn't you continue the ceremony now? Zhao Jiqing looked at Murong Yu with a smile. Murong Yu's face darkened. Did he have to perform the ceremony a second time? It was just a ceremony. There was no need. Yu Mengqing smiled. First, she glanced at Kurlan and Situ Xian, then turned to Murong Yu. There's no need to perform the ceremony. But what should we do after the ceremony? Don't you need me to teach you? You haven't consummated your marriage yet. Little man, you've made little sister's Kurlan anxious. Mu Liua looked at Kurlan and Situ Xian with a teasing gaze. Lan Qir's and Situ Xian's faces immediately turned red. Although they had already performed the ceremony, how could they talk about consummating their marriage in public? This was so embarrassing that she could die from embarrassment. These three women are getting stronger. Murong Yu could not stand Zhao Jiqing and the other two's strength. Especially in the past, when Murong secretly kissed Zhao Jiqing, she would blush for a long time. How could he be so bold now? What? We're already an old couple. Are you still shy? Looking at Murong's cheeky face, Mu Liyue could not help but roll her eyes. This guy was so fierce in bed, but now he was pretending to be an innocent little virgin. Murong laughed. Don't you know how to be jealous? No, because the three of us can't satisfy you. Zhao Jiqing, Yu Mengqing, and Mu Liyue looked at each other and said in unison. But soon they blushed. The stronger Murong was, the more powerful he was in bed. Now, the three women were no match for Murong even if they used all their skills. It was because of this that they worked hard to set up Lan and Sidu Xian. Murong could not help but blush. He was not addicted to women, but some things did not mean that he would not do. Occasionally, especially when they met after a long separation, he was usually so fierce that Zhao Jiqing and the other two could not get out of bed. Ha! In that case, let's consummate our marriage. Murong laughed. With a wave of his hand, he swept Lan and Situ Xian up, then took a step and disappeared from the holy palace. Chapter 1199. While Murong was spending the night with Lan and Sidu Xian, the Holy Realm made another move. More saints descended from the sky, from the Holy Realm to the God Realm. However, it was different from the previous time when there were so many of them. This time, there were only a few hundred saints. What's going on? Didn't tens of millions of saints descend before? What's the situation this time? A saint stepped out of the teleportation formation and spread his divine telekinesis to observe the surrounding environment as he spoke to his companion. Cut the crap. The higher-ups have their own plans for sending us down. We just need to carry out the orders, a saint who seemed to be the leader reprimanded. However, he did not frown at all. This time, they had come down to say that they had a special mission. However, he did not know what the special mission was. Moreover, when they spread out their divine telekinesis, the surroundings were very quiet. Not to mention the saints, they did not even discover a single life form. This was the teleportation formation that connected the God Realm and the Holy Realm. It was especially important to the saints. In principle, there should be many saints guarding this place. However, the situation now was very strange. They still did not know that the tens of millions of saints had already fallen. All of a sudden, an extremely strong and dangerous aura attacked. The saint who was the leader immediately shouted, "Be careful." However, before he could finish his sentence, the bodies and souls of the hundreds of saints, including him, exploded at the same time. Rumble. The blood cloud appeared again. Naturally, they were killed by Murong. However, Murong did not come over. In fact, Murong was still riding on Lan's body at this moment. To him, killing in the God Realm was something that could be done with a single thought. The Holy Realm. They have indeed all fallen, and that's why they appeared in the God Realm. Seeing the hundreds of saints' soul jade slips exploding at the same time, the faces of the important figures of the human race and demon race were terrifyingly gloomy. They've fallen as soon as they entered the God Realm. We don't even know what's going on. These people's special mission was to be cannon fodder and help the saints find out what had happened in the God Realm. However, how could Murong not know their plan? How could they possibly figure it all out? Continue to send people down. However, those hundreds of people are only saints. This time, we'll send great saints down. It didn't take long for several hundred great sages to appear in the God Realm. These people's alertness and reactions were much stronger than the saints. As the dangerous aura enveloped their hearts, they wanted to erupt with the strength of a great saint to resist. However, in the divine world, Murong was the ruler. How could they resist? Unable to resist at all, he was directly killed. Next, the undead saints also came down. However, so what if he was an undying saint? They could still be killed. In the saints' world, it would be extremely difficult for ordinary people to kill experts of that level. This was because they were immortal. As long as they still had a little bit of their soul or something else, they could come back to life. But in the immortal realm, everything related to them was instantly annihilated putting an end to the possibility of their revival. If an undying saint could be easily killed, then the two races of the divine world would be helpless. This was because undead saints couldn't enter the immortal realm at all, even if they were sealed and suppressed. Even their teleportation array couldn't withstand an imperishable realm expert. However, the two races of the saints' world were extremely determined to revive Huang. Even Murong Yu underestimated them. This was because in the following period of time, a group of saints would occasionally come down. Of course, the result was unsurprisingly death. However, the saints were unyielding, which annoyed Murong Yu to no end. In fact, Murong Yu even had the impulse to destroy their teleportation arrays and seal the barrier of the immortal realm. However, he didn't do it in the end. He wanted to use this method to defeat the two races of the saints' world so that they wouldn't dare send anyone down. However, this would take a very long time. This was because there were too many people in the saints' world. It was completely not a problem for tens of millions or hundreds of millions to die. In contrast to the tireless saints' world sending people down, the immortal realm was silent at this moment. This was because everyone knew that Murong Yu was the ruler of the immortal realm. As long as Murong Yu didn't die, the immortal realm wouldn't be invaded by saints. This was what everyone thought. This was because they often saw saints dying near the saints' teleportation arrays. The heaven and earth phenomenon didn't seem to stop. In the end, there were even many gods who went there to watch the sages fall one after another. They were happy because of this. The immortal realm was peaceful. At this moment, the humans and demons in the immortal realm were no longer at odds with each other. Although the two races still had grudges because of the previous war and feud, many people had realized the truth of strength when united. Many forces started to communicate with the demons and humans. In fact, the immortal realm no longer separated the humans and demons' territories. This was because Murong Yu worked tirelessly to build teleportation arrays between the continents to facilitate communication between the two races. Murong Yu even made a move that shocked the immortal realm. Shenzhen started to recruit demons as disciples. Of course, not everyone could become Shenzhen's disciple. They had to pass Shenzhen's test. Moreover, Shenzhen was recruiting disciples from all the continents in the immortal realm, including those low-level continents. Unfortunately, many low-level continents didn't have many people left. Many people were captured by saints and used as blood sacrifices. Many people didn't understand why Murong Yu wanted to recruit demons as disciples. In fact, they didn't know that a considerable number of Shenzhen's disciples were demons. They were all extreme heaven realm demons. Some demons were even Shenzhen's higher-ups, such as the fire-eyed golden ape and the big black dog. Moreover, Murong Yu had considered the future. The saints and humans in the holy realm were sworn enemies. It was inevitable that they wouldn't tolerate Murong Yu. On the other hand, Murong Yu had gone against the human and demon clans time and time again. These two clans were destined to not tolerate him. Once people from the immortal realm ascended to the holy realm, they wouldn't even have a foothold. It would be very difficult. Murong Yu wanted to nurture his own team. These people were the foundation for him to establish himself in the holy realm. Moreover, unlike before, the current Shenzhen was personally supported by Murong Yu. Some people who were extremely talented or not, but relied on their own efforts to continuously raise their realm. These people would be personally guided by Murong Yu. Moreover, Murong Yu didn't only guide his own experience. He also guided Hichu's experience. Hichu, even the average saint's experience was far inferior to his. Therefore, many disciples in Shenzhen received Murong Yu's guidance, and their strength increased by leaps and bounds. As for the people around Murong Yu was never stingy with all kinds of resources to nurture them. Now, Zhao Jiqing and the others were all quasi-saint experts. This was very terrifying. One had to know that they had ascended to the immortal realm for a very long time, but they had all become quasi-saint experts. How could the others endure this? Everyone's strength increased sharply, and so did Shenzhen's. After the news spread, Shenzhen gradually became the holy land of cultivation in the immortal realm. Shenzhen had the best cultivation environment in the entire immortal realm. It had the most vast resources in the immortal realm, and it had the strongest people in the immortal realm. Most importantly, Shenzhen didn't unify the immortal realm. Shenzhen was still Shenzhen. He wasn't the overlord of the immortal realm. Moreover, even if Murong Yu became the master of the immortal realm, he didn't have the intention to unify the immortal realm. He only wanted to promote the interaction between the two races. This was a good thing for the entire immortal realm. Therefore, more and more people wanted to join Shenzhen. However, many people helplessly found out that although Shenzhen didn't require talent, it didn't matter even if one was as stupid as a pig. They only needed to pass their loyalty test. However, this simple test was enough to stop almost everyone. Only 1 in a million could pass this test. Even so, more and more people came to take the test. This was because they all saw that those who became Shenzhen's disciples had changed since they stepped foot in Shenzhen. They had brand new cultivation techniques, various offensive and defensive divine weapons, and a large amount of resources. With this accumulation, their combat power immediately increased sharply. Moreover, they had a great teacher to guide them. Everything was developing according to Murong Yu's plan. He wanted to nurture enough experts for Shenzhen before he ascended to the immortal realm. On this day, rumble, waves of earth-shattering sounds came from afar. Looking from afar, far away in the eastern wilderness, there were flowers floating in the sky, covering the sky and earth. Flowers rained down from the sky. Murong Yu saw this scene immediately, and his expression changed instantly. Flowers rain down from the sky. Someone has become a saint. Moreover, this person's achievements in the future will definitely be extraordinary. Hichu's voice changed too. Ordinary people who became saints, even Murong Yu, didn't cause such a phenomenon. Who was this person who caused such a phenomenon? Murong Yu took a step forward and disappeared from the Shenzhen Sacred Palace. When he reappeared, he was already in the eastern wilderness. At this moment, the entire eastern wilderness was covered by falling flowers, and the ground was covered with layers of petals. The phenomenon continued. Murong Yu looked over, and his expression changed again in the next moment. This was because he saw Murong's pavilion. Murong Yu had become a saint. Immediately, Murong Yu used his divine power to isolate the entire eastern wilderness. Becoming a saint was accompanied by a phenomenon. This news couldn't be spread out, or would bring great danger to Murong's pavilion. In the immortal realm, this kind of person was nurtured by every force. However, who would nurture someone from the immortal realm? They would only kill him. Otherwise, once Murong's pavilion grew, it would be extremely terrifying. They couldn't watch an enemy grow, so they chose to kill him in the cradle. Chapter 1200. Deluge of Heavenly Flowers. When Murong Yu became a saint and caused the heaven and earth anomaly, the holy world also sensed it. However, those who sensed the heaven and earth anomaly were only the top experts. Among these people, there were some experts from the Holy Clan, some from the Human Clan, and there were also experts from the Demon Clan. However, when they sensed it and tried to use their divine sense to enter the God realm to see who caused the heaven and earth anomaly, they found that their divine sense couldn't enter. This made them very surprised, shocked, and even angry. One had to know that people who caused the heaven and earth anomaly when becoming a saint were extremely rare in the God realm. Almost none. Therefore, when these experts sensed it, they immediately thought of taking Murong's Xian for their own use or as a disciple. After all, as long as Murong's Xian didn't die prematurely in the future, he would definitely achieve great things. Could it be that someone made a move first? Those super experts' divine sense couldn't enter the God realm, so they immediately became suspicious. Even my divine sense can't enter. Could it be that a supreme being interfered? Someone frowned and thought to himself. There were many people who had such thoughts, because they were all top experts in the holy world. They all knew what it meant to cause the heaven and earth anomaly when breaking through. One had to know that among the supreme beings in the holy world, there was one who caused the heaven and earth anomaly when breaking through. and this person's strength soared all the way, and he didn't even need a long time to become a supreme being. If Murong's Xian hadn't matured yet, it would definitely be beneficial to take him for their own use. However, it was normal for a talent of this level to attract the attention of a supreme being. Pay close attention to the person who recently ascended to the holy world, and take him down directly. Some important figures of the Holy Clan, Human Clan, and Demon Clan directly gave out orders. If it was one of their own, it would be fine, as they could take him in after he ascended. But if it was the other two clans, they would definitely kill him at all costs. They definitely didn't want to see a supreme being appear in the other two clans. However, was it really the supreme being who interfered? The supreme being didn't interfere. To existences of their level, no matter how heaven-defying Murong Xian was, he was still too weak. With their strength, it wouldn't be too late to interfere when Murong Xian matured, because no one had interfered. All of this was because Murong Yu had taken control of the God Realm. The extravagant display lasted for a full 3 months. 3 months later, the smallpox gradually disappeared. At this time, Murong Xian had officially become a false saint. As long as he passed the holy tribulation and entered the holy world to condense a holy body, he would become a true saint. During this process, Murong Yu had been guarding Murong Xian from the side. They were afraid that the people above would kill Murong Xian. This was because Hichu had warned him long ago that the phenomenon of falling flowers could be sensed in the saint's world. "Father, why are you here?" After spending a few more months to consolidate his realm, Murong Xian slowly opened his eyes. The first thing he saw was Murong Yu, and he asked in surprise, "After you broke through to become a saint, you caused a phenomenon of heaven and earth." Murong Yu roughly told him about the extravagant display of falling flowers, and he was immediately shocked. "Father, I don't seem to have anything special, right? My physique is ordinary, and I'm just slightly more talented. These aren't enough to cause a phenomenon of heaven and earth. Is it because I received the Eastern Wilderness inheritance?" Murong Xian pondered for a while, and then asked in confusion. Murong Yu shook his head. He and Hichu had discussed this for a long time, but they didn't know the reason. "Or maybe there's something different about you, but we can't discover or see it. Or maybe it's really related to the Eastern Wilderness inheritance," Murong Yu said slowly. This was also the result of his discussion with Hichu. Murong Xian's physique was ordinary, but that was before. Ever since he received the Eastern Wilderness inheritance, who knew what kind of transformation his physical body had undergone? It had been tempered by the essence of the Eastern Wilderness. Perhaps it had become the same physique as the Eastern Wilderness. This matter shouldn't alarm the higher-ups, right? Murong Xian pointed to the top of his head, and he looked a little depressed. "They know for sure. However, you don't have to worry. Go back and prepare. After your cultivation stabilizes, you'll undergo the heavenly tribulation." Strictly speaking, Murong Xian wasn't considered a fake saint because he hadn't undergone the heavenly tribulation yet. Only after undergoing the heavenly tribulation would he be considered a fake saint. However, the heavenly tribulation was much more terrifying than the God's tribulation. Even Murong Yu himself didn't dare to undergo the heavenly tribulation rashly. He was often struck by lightning, and if that was the case, what more others? Immediately, Murong Yu and his father returned to Shenzhen. Then, Murong Xian officially announced that he had successfully broken through to become a saint. While it shocked the entire realm of gods, it also made countless people envious. In the end, their envy became motivation. Suddenly, there was a cultivation craze in the realm of gods. This was Murong Yu's goal. Of course, if he hadn't become the lord of the realm of gods, he wouldn't have announced this matter. Wouldn't this be telling others that it was Murong Xian who caused the heavenly tribulation? Time flowed like water, and 1,000,000 years passed in the blink of an eye. In this 1,000,000 years, Murong Xian's cultivation had long been consolidated. However, Murong Yu didn't let him undergo the heavenly tribulation. Although he had confidence in Murong Xian, he didn't want him to take the risk. He wanted to undergo the heavenly tribulation himself, and try the power of the heavenly tribulation. In this way, Murong Xian would be more experienced. In this million years, Murong Yu's cultivation finally broke through and reached the false saint realm. His cultivation and soul had both reached the false saint realm. Even if he wasn't the lord of the realm of gods, he was an invincible existence in the realm of gods. Once he successfully underwent the heavenly tribulation, he could ascend to the holy world. Of course, if he suppressed his realm, he wouldn't ascend immediately. I will undergo the heavenly tribulation in 10 years. Murong Yu thought for a long time and finally decided to undergo the heavenly tribulation in 10 years. This was because after a million years, no one in the holy world dared to come down. Over the years, the number of saints killed by Murong Yu had reached a terrifying number of hundreds of millions. Murong Yu decided to undergo the heavenly tribulation because he felt that the saints didn't dare to come down. Murong, after you undergo the heavenly tribulation, are you going to ascend to the holy world? On this day, Zhao Jiqing and the other girls gathered beside Murong Yu. All of them looked at Murong Yu with resentment. Murong Yu felt helpless. He had to ascend to the holy world eventually. It was impossible for him to stay in the realm of gods forever. No, I must have a child before you ascend. Otherwise, you are not allowed to ascend. Kurlan pinched Murong Yu's shoulder and said valiantly. Situ Xian nodded repeatedly. Yes, you are not allowed to ascend. Murong Yu's face immediately darkened. All these years, he had been working hard on the 5 girls' little plot of land. However, what was there to gain? At their level, it was too difficult to have child. Murong Xian and the others had already had children in the immortal world. After ascending to the realm of gods for so long, Zhao Jiqing and the others still didn't have any children in their stomachs. In fact, it wasn't just them. Those with a high level of cultivation were the same. It was precisely because of this that parents would spoil their children so much. Some things can't be forced. Murong Yu is helpless. Is it because you can't do it? Lan Qir coldly snorted as she looked at Murong Yu's little brother provocatively. It's not like you don't know if I can do it or not. Murong Yu grabbed Kurlan and pressed her on his legs. Immediately, Kurlan's perky butt rose high. Slap, slap, slap. Murong Yu raised his hand and landed a few slaps on Lan Qir's astonishingly supple and soft buttocks, causing loud slapping sounds to ring out. Humph humph. Kurlan groaned in pain at first, but later her groans changed. They were filled with endless temptation. Her face was like a peach blossom, and her big watery eyes were looking at Murong Yu. She looked pitiful but also irresistible. In fact, her body was constantly rubbing itself against Murong Yu's body at just the right moment. Whoosh! Murong Yu reacted instantly. His little brother immediately raised his spear and looked angrily at the sky. Today, I must punish you. Murong Yu snorted coldly. His big hand covered Kurlan's body and shook violently. Immediately, Kurlan's clothes were shaken into powder. Immediately, a beautiful pink body appeared in front of Murong Yu, Zhao Jiqing, and the others. I want. At this time, Kurlan looked at Murong Yu and breathed out. Her voice was filled with temptation, and Murong Yu instantly exploded. His body shook, and the clothes on his body shattered. Then he pressed Kurlan down on the table, raised his spear, and got on the horse, and went straight for the root of the problem. Humph! A sound filled with satisfaction, comfort, and temptation came out from Kurlan's cherry lips. The room was filled with spring. Slut! Slut! Seeing that Murong Yu and Lin Mingyao were performing an erotic scene in front of them, Zhao Jiqing and the others quickly turned their heads away, their faces red. However, while their faces were red and their hearts were shy, they did not leave. Instead, they peeked at them, their faces red. Pervert! Pervert! Zhao Jiqing and the others spat at Murong Yu. We are already an old couple. Why are you still so shy? Murong Yu vigorously pounced on Kurlan. Then his big hand suddenly reached out and directly sucked Yu Mengqing over. In the next moment, his pair of devilish hands covered Yu Mengqing's perfectly round breasts, which made Yu Mengqing exclaim in surprise. It was because of her round breasts that the two of them were together. Ever since that time, Murong Yu liked Yu Mengqing's breast very much. None of you three can escape. Murong Yu looked at Zhao Jiqing and the others and said with a smile. Chapter 1201. The Jade Desolate Continent was a continent about the same size as the Dream Desolate Continent. Originally, the number of gods living on this continent was much more than the Dream Desolate Continent. However, there was no one there at the moment. The vast majority of people had been captured by the Saints, while the remaining few had already fled the Jade Desolate Continent. Suddenly, a figure appeared out of thin air in the center of the Jade Desolate Continent. Immediately, the void behind him split open, and an incomparably huge spatial passage appeared. One figure after another flew out of the spatial passage, and then gathered behind the first person. In less than an hour, hundreds of millions of experts appeared on the Jade Desolate Continent. It was a vast and mighty scene, and the momentum was astonishing. These people were Shenzhen's top experts, and the vast majority were quasi-saint level existences. Even if some of them had not reached the quasi-saint level, their status was extremely high. Apart from them, no one else had entered the Jade Desolate Continent, because today was the day of Murong Yu's tribulation. Holy tribulation. Murong Yu swept a glance at Zhao Jiqing and the others, and then shouted in a deep voice, "All of you, back off." Immediately, he soared into the sky and stood in the sky. Zhao Jiqing and the others immediately retreated and finally arrived at the edge of the Jade Desolate Continent. None of them had seen the holy tribulation before, but they knew how terrifying it was. The reason why they were all called over was because of Murong Yu's good intentions. Murong Yu wanted to let these people feel the might of the holy tribulation in advance. At that time, they would have more confidence in transcending the tribulation. However, no one knew how big the range of the holy tribulation was, so they could only retreat far away. Otherwise, once they were drawn into the holy tribulation, they would definitely be miserable. Taking a deep breath, Murong Yu raised his head to look at the sky, and then immediately released the power suppression on his body. Rumble. Just as he erupted with the aura of a false saint, the sky was immediately covered by a thick layer of tribulation clouds, enveloping the entire Jade Desolate Continent. At this moment, all the lives on the Jade Desolate Continent felt panic and heaviness in their hearts. Furthermore, an aura of death enveloped them. Everyone's expression couldn't help but change. These tribulation clouds wouldn't treat them as tribulation transcendents, right? There could be more than 100 million saints. Their strength was extremely powerful. If they were treated as the ones undergoing the tribulation, this tribulation would immediately send them all to the Western Paradise. As their expressions changed, they retreated again and again. In the end, they left the Jade Desolate Continent and entered the Divine Sea before stopping. At this time, looking from afar, the entire Jade Desolate Continent was shrouded by the black tribulation clouds. It was like an iron pot that was placed upside down on the Jade Desolate Continent. An aura that could make one's soul tremble continued to grow stronger, intimidating the myriad worlds. Zhao Jiqing and the other four girls stood together and looked at Murong Yu in the sky, who was preparing to transcend the tribulation. Their faces were full of worry. He hasn't even transcended the tribulation yet, but his aura is already so heavy and oppressive. Wasn't the saint's world a little too terrifying? Nothing will happen to the big pervert, right? Kurlan grabbed Yu Mengqing's hand tightly and said worriedly, "Don't worry. Although the tribulation is terrifying, Murong." Zhao Jiqing comforted Kurlan. However, before his voice fell, a black tribulation, lightning the size of a small mountain, descended from the thick tribulation clouds. Boom! At the same time the black tribulation lightning struck down, a loud explosion sounded. Immediately, Zhao Jiqing was so shocked that she stopped talking. The others didn't have it easy either. Their bodies trembled and their souls trembled. It was to the extent that some people even staggered and fell to the ground in fright. making them look like a joke. However, no one laughed at him, because each and every one of them was frightened stiff. The only one who wasn't frightened was Murongyu. From the cultivation world to the quasi-saint realm, Murongyu had to welcome the baptism of the heavenly tribulation every time he broke through a realm. However, as his physical body gradually grew stronger, those heavenly tribulations had no effect on him. Therefore, every time he went through the tribulation, he would go out and float in the air, allowing the tribulation lightning to strike down while he withstood it by himself. However, his usual heavenly tribulation and tribulation lightning were white in color. But now, the tribulation was actually black. When he saw the black tribulation lightning, Murongyu's heart tightened. However, he felt that the tribulation lightning didn't have any power. Therefore, he didn't put up any defense at all and allowed the tribulation lightning to strike his body. Chila, the clothes on his body were instantly shattered and turned into fine powder. However, other than that, he didn't have any injuries on his body. Even his hair was still dancing wildly like before. His black hair was dancing wildly. With a thought, Murongyu used his power to create a set of clothes and draped it over his body. Outside the jade desolate continent, there were over 100 million experts staring at him without blinking. Moreover, there were many female gods among them. He didn't have a fetish for nudity. Seeing that Murongyu had safely passed through the tribulation lightning, everyone in the distance breathed a sigh of relief. However, at the same time, they were shocked and horrified in their hearts. The explosion just now had almost shattered their souls, let alone the tribulation lightning. They all asked themselves, could they have withstood that tribulation lightning? The answer of the vast majority was that they could have withstood it. However, even if they had withstood it, they would have been injured. Moreover, it would have consumed a lot of their resources. Like Murongyu, no one could have withstood it as if nothing had happened. There are still 80 tribulation lightning bolts. A 10th-stage quasi-saint looked at the thick tribulation clouds with flickering eyes with a solemn expression. There were only 81 tribulation lightning bolts in the tribulation. As long as one could pass through these 81 tribulation lightning bolts, one could reach the false saint realm. As for Murongyu, he had only passed through the weakest first tribulation lightning. No matter what kind of tribulation it was, each one was more terrifying than the last. Boom, 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 boom. Black tribulation, lightning the size of a small hill, continued to strike down, causing many experts outside the continent to turn pale. Their souls kept trembling as if they were about to collapse. All of them kept retreating in fear. However, as the person involved, Murongyu, stood in the sky as if nothing had happened, allowing the tribulation lightning to strike his body. He didn't put up any defense, nor did he feel any pain. Even the people in the distance saw that he was smiling. Perhaps only a freak like the Holy Master can pass through the tribulation so easily. Only he can pass through the tribulation with a smile on his face. The people in the distance were frightened. Every time the tribulation lightning struck, they had to retreat for a long time. However, when they saw Murongyu's expression, they were all ashamed. The Holy Master is indeed the Holy Master. The gap between him and us is too big. The 10th stage quasi-saint and the gods at the peak of the divine grade looked solemn. They all sighed in their hearts at the huge gap between them and Murongyu. Even Murongxian's expression changed. Of course, he knew that an ordinary saint's tribulation wouldn't be so terrifying. The power of Murongyu's first tribulation lightning was equivalent to the power of the last few tribulation lightning strikes in the holy world. The 10th tribulation lightning. At this moment, the experts of Shenzhen had already reached the depths of the divine sea. Boom! After a loud explosion, a black tribulation lightning the size of a mountain struck down. Everyone's heart skipped a beat. This tribulation lightning was more than 10 times bigger than the previous ones. Its power and aura were more than 10 times stronger as well. Its speed was the same as well. Therefore, Murongyu didn't even have time to react before he was struck by the tribulation lightning. Murong instantly suffered a tragic fate. At this moment, Kurlan and the others couldn't help but exclaim. The other disciples of Shenzhen also opened their mouths in shock. This was because they saw that Murong Yu, who was originally suspended in the void, was struck directly into the depths of the ground by the tribulation lightning and disappeared from everyone's sight. Previously, Murong Yu resisted it with ease, but now he was struck deep into the ground. Wasn't the gap too big? However, even though they were all shocked, no one rushed up to him. This was because the tribulation clouds in the sky had yet to dissipate. If the tribulation clouds hadn't dissipated, it meant that the person undergoing the tribulation hadn't died yet. Moreover, Murong Yu's soul jade slip in the hands of Zhao Jiqing and the others didn't shatter either. Bang! Just as Murong Yu was struck deep into the ground, he broke through the ground and flew up. From afar, he looked embarrassed. A mistake, a mistake. At this moment, Murong Yu's entire body was charred black. His black hair stood on end, and he pointed angrily at the sky. However, Murong Yu's physical body was considered strong. If it had been anyone else, they would have been blown to smithereens. Murong Yu had indeed made a mistake. He didn't expect the 10th tribulation lightning to be dozens of times more powerful than the 9th tribulation lightning. Moreover, it was extremely fast. By the time he reacted, his entire body had been struck deep into the ground. This is only the 10th tribulation lightning, and it's already so powerful. There are still 60 to 70 tribulation lightning after this. Murong Yu finally became serious. Moreover, he vaguely felt that this tribulation would be the biggest crisis he had ever faced in his life. After all, his soul and cultivation had both broken through to the sage realm. The more powerful one was, the more terrifying the tribulation would be. The tribulation lightning continued to strike. Before the 20th tribulation lightning, the tribulation lightning didn't cause any injury to Murong Yu. However, after the 20th tribulation lightning, the power of the tribulation lightning skyrocketed again. At this time, Murong Yu had already begun to use his power to resist the tribulation lightning. After the 30th tribulation lightning, Murong Yu's flesh snake began to have wounds. However, with the recovery of his life force, it wasn't a threat to him. However, when the tribulation lightning reached the 40th tribulation lightning, Murong Yu began to feel that it was a tragedy. The tribulation lightning's power skyrocketed and its speed skyrocketed. Moreover, the distance between each tribulation lightning was shrinking. It was simply one after another. In other words, as soon as this tribulation lightning struck, the one behind it would follow. Before Murong Yu's injuries were completely healed, he was injured again. Chapter 1202. It's the 60th bolt of tribulation lightning. The Divine Lord is truly powerful. He's still not using any treasures or divine artifacts, and is only using his physical body to resist. Bolts of tribulation lightning continuously struck down from the Jade Desolate Continent, bombarding Murong Yu's body. After taking on the frightening tribulation lightning head-on, Murong Yu was sent flying like duckweed. However, from start to finish, Murong Yu hadn't used any divine tools to block the heavenly tribulation. It was precisely because of this that the experts of Shenzhen were shocked. If it were me, even if I had a divine artifact or treasure, I probably wouldn't be able to resist. A 10th level quasi-saint looked at Murong Yu with a pale face and whispered to the people beside him. The high-level quasi-saint beside him shook their heads, their faces pale. I'm afraid we won't be able to withstand such a heavy heavenly tribulation. The Divine Lord's physical body and cultivation are much stronger than ours. However, only the Divine Lord can trigger such tribulation lightning. According to the records, an ordinary divine tribulation would at most have the power of the 30th tribulation of a Divine Lord, and that's only for those with extraordinary talent. An ordinary person's divine tribulation would only have the power of the 20th tribulation of a Divine Lord. A 10th level quasi-saint said in a deep voice, his eyes flickering. This person was the head of the Fan family, Fangua. The reason he said this was because he didn't want these saints to be frightened by Murong Yu's divine tribulation. Moreover, he had a basis for saying this. At this moment, Murong Yu's body was charred black from the lightning strikes, and he was groaning in his heart. He didn't use any divine artifacts to resist the power of the tribulation. However, he was constantly using his life force to heal his injured body. Otherwise, his body would have been blasted to pieces long ago. However, the speed at which his life force healed his body was clearly not as fast as the speed at which he was injured. Moreover, what made Murong Yu the most speechless was that although the tribulation lightning looked terrifying, it contained great power. However, his body was no longer able to absorb the power of the tribulation lightning. According to Lu Haozong, his physical body had already reached the limit of the divine world. If he continued to break through, he could only condense a divine body. However, it was impossible to condense a sacred body in the God realm. This made Murong Yu feel that it was a pity. If he could condense a holy body, the power of these thunderbolts could increase his physical body by several small realms. Boom! When the 70th bolt of tribulation lightning struck down, Murong Yu was once again smashed deep into the ground. At the same time, Shangzhen's group in the distance also exclaimed, because they clearly saw that just now, Murong Yu's body had been blasted open one after another shocking, bone-deep wounds. Blood splattered everywhere. It was extremely horrifying. His entire body had been bombarded with wounds so deep that his bones could be seen. Blood was gushing out. At this moment, Murong Yu felt as if all the flesh and blood in his body had been destroyed. There was no sign of life, and all the bones in his body had been shattered. Even a large part of his meridians had been shattered. If it was anyone else, this kind of injury would definitely be fatal. Even for the current Murong Yu, it was extremely dangerous. This was because at this moment, another bolt of tribulation lightning struck down. The 71st bolt of tribulation lightning was more than 10 times more powerful than the 70th bolt of tribulation lightning. The 70th bolt of tribulation lightning had already caused him to be severely injured, let alone the even more powerful 71st bolt of tribulation lightning. If this bolt of tribulation lightning struck down, Murong Yu's physical body might be blasted into smithereens. Even if his soul had already become a sage, it would be smashed into smithereens, and he would be deader than dead. I definitely can't let this bolt of tribulation lightning strike down, Murong Yu roared in his heart. Finally, he took out the Hichu Luoshu. The Hichu Luoshu expanded against the wind. It quickly expanded and rolled towards the bolt of tribulation lightning that was striking down. It attempted to block the bolt of tribulation lightning. There was no need to doubt the power of the Hichu Luoshu. However, Murong Yu could only use a small part of its power. Even so, he successfully blocked the bolt of tribulation lightning for a few breaths of time. After a few breaths of time, the Hichu Luoshu was blasted away by the bolt of tribulation lightning. However, although the Hichu Luoshu did not completely block the power of the bolt of tribulation lightning, it still managed to offset some of its power. In the end, when the bolt of tribulation lightning struck Murong Yu's body, Murong Yu had already used these few breaths of time to successfully repair his physical body. Therefore, he easily blocked the bolt of tribulation lightning. However, this was only the 71st bolt of tribulation lightning. There were still 9 more to come. With a thought, Murong Yu had already repaired his injured physical body. At the same time, the Hichu Luoshu flew back and floated above his head. After making all these preparations, the 72nd bolt of tribulation lightning struck down. However, this time, Murong Yu operated the Hichu Luoshu with all his strength. After offsetting a portion of the tribulation lightning's power, he successfully resisted it. Very soon, he welcomed the 80th bolt of tribulation lightning. Zhao Jiqing and the other 4 girls of the Jade Desolate Continent leaned against each other and held hands. Each of them had a nervous expression as they looked at Murong Yu, who was undergoing the tribulation in front of them. Each of them could feel the sweat on each other's palms. They could even feel that the hands they were holding were slightly trembling. "It's all right. It's definitely all right," Zhao Jiqing said in a deep voice. She seemed to be comforting Yu Mengqing and the others, but also seemed to be comforting herself. Like them, the palms of Shenzhen's people were sweating. Each of them looked at Murongyu with incomparable nervousness. These were the last 2 bolts of tribulation lightning. On the 79th bolt of tribulation lightning, Murongyu had already brought out the Yin-Yang Cauldron. The Yin-Yang Cauldron and the Hichu Luo Shu, these 2 super magical treasures, were barely able to block the tribulation lightning. Even so, the tribulation lightning almost blasted Murongyu into a pile of mud. The power of the 80th bolt of tribulation lightning was definitely more than 100 times stronger than the 79th bolt. However, perhaps these were the last 2 bolts of tribulation lightning. It had been a long time since the 79th bolt of tribulation lightning. However, it didn't descend. Perhaps it was to give the person undergoing the tribulation time to prepare. The tribulation clouds in the sky became thicker and thicker. Waves of terrifying pressure unceasingly spread out, enveloping half of the sky and suppressing all living things to the point that they trembled. Far away in the jade, desolate continent, Shenzhen's people felt incomparable pressure in their hearts. Their souls were slightly trembling under this terrifying pressure, as if they could be destroyed at any time. Boom! All of a sudden, there was a loud explosion in the sky. An incomparably huge black tribulation, lightning the size of a divine mountain, appeared out of thin air. It tore through the void, locked onto Murongyu, and blasted down. Plop, plop, plop. The instant this black tribulation lightning appeared, the hearts of Shenzhen's experts in the depths of the divine ocean trembled. Then, they involuntarily fell to the divine ocean. Although the remaining portion didn't fall, they didn't feel any better. Their faces were pale, and their eyes were filled with fear. The people far away in the jade desolate continent were already like this, let alone the person involved, Murongyu. The instant that tribulation lightning appeared, Murongyu's heart was suddenly enveloped by an incomparably strong aura of death. There was no time to think at all. Hichu Luo Shu and the Yin-Yang Cauldron soared into the sky, affecting the divine mountain-sized tribulation lightning that came crashing down. At the same time, with a thought, the Yin-Yang bow and the heaven-shaking arrow that he hadn't used for a long time appeared in his hands. He drew the bow and knocked the arrow. In less than 1/10 of an instant, 3 heaven-shaking arrows were shot out by him. Rumble. The heaven-shaking arrows arrived first. Before Hichu Luo Shu and the Yin-Yang Cauldron, they collided with the terrifying black tribulation lightning. After an earth-shattering explosion, the 3 heaven-shaking arrows that contained terrifying power were directly sent flying. The black tribulation lightning continued to strike down, but its power was reduced by less than 1/10. At this time, the Yin-Yang Cauldron had also won. The flame of primal chaos burned crazily, and the void was constantly being annihilated. However, the flame of primal chaos that could annihilate the void didn't have much effect on the black tribulation lightning. When the flame of primal chaos and the tribulation lightning collided, the flame of primal chaos was quickly annihilated. Yes, the flame of primal chaos was annihilated. One could imagine how terrifying the tribulation lightning was. However, although the flame of primal chaos was being annihilated quickly, it also consumed the tribulation lightning at the same time. However, the consumption was extremely small. It was probably when 100 portions of the flame of primal chaos were annihilated, only 1 portion of the tribulation lightning was consumed. However, there was a lot of flame of primal chaos. Therefore, when the Yin-Yang Cauldron was sent flying, the tribulation lightning's power was also consumed by about 20%. In addition to the 10% that was consumed by the heaven-shaking arrows, the tribulation lightning was now only 70% of its original power. At this time, Hichu Luo Shu had already rushed forward. Unlike the yin-yang cauldron and the heaven-shaking arrows, Hichuluoshu was like a painting that blocked the sky above Murong Yu's head, preventing the tribulation lightning from striking down. Moreover, under Murong Yu's full control, Hichuluoshu and the tribulation lightning engaged in the most tragic battle. Hichuluoshu was constantly being bombarded, but Hichuluoshu was fine. However, Murong Yu was not. The overflowing damage was constantly bombarding Murong Yu, causing his mind to be constantly injured and his soul to sway unsteadily. It was soul-stirring. However, even with Murong Yu's full control, he was still not the tribulation lightning's opponent. Suddenly, Hichuluoshu was sent flying. The remaining tribulation lightning bombarded Murong Yu's body. Bang! After an explosion, Murong Yu's entire body exploded. Boom! Crack! Crack! The moment Murong Yu's body exploded, the soul jade slip in the hands of Zhao Jiqing and the others shattered at the same time, turning into a pile of powder. The soul jade slip shattered. Murong Yu had fallen. Murong Yu had failed to pass the tribulation. He had actually fallen, and he had fallen in the penultimate heavenly tribulation. Chapter 1203. Murong Yu had fallen. No. The first to react was Zhao Jiqing. Her face was pale as she screamed. Her figure swayed, and she fainted. After Zhao Jiqing, the other women were the same. They all screamed and fell down. Before, Murong Yu also had the experience of the soul jade slip shattering. But at that time, they didn't see Murong Yu fall with their own eyes. Therefore, they all had hope in their hearts and were not as excited as they were now. But now that they saw Murong Yu turn into ashes with their own eyes, no matter how strong they were, they couldn't bear this blow. The 5 women all fainted with excitement, and Murong Xian, Gu Kai, and the others were almost scared to death. But compared to Zhao Jiqing and the other women, they were calmer. With a flash, Murong Xian came to Zhao Jiqing's side and reached out to support her. At the same time, he also released a force to wrap around Yu Mengqing and the other women to prevent them from falling to the ground. Immediately, Murong Xian and the others reacted and came up to support a person. As for the others, they could only stare in front of them in shock. After seeing the intense reaction of Zhao Jiqing and the others, they realized that Murong Yu had fallen. In an instant, they were shocked by the news. "Big brother, what should we do?" "Father, Murong Xian supported Yu Mengqing and looked at Murong Xian with a pale face. Murong Xian was the strongest among them. Unknowingly, Murong Xian and the others had already regarded Murong Xian as the backbone. Murong Xian didn't speak, just looked at the continent in front of him with a gloomy face. He couldn't believe the fact that Murong Yu had fallen. But their soul jade slips were indeed shattered. And now Murong Yu was really bombarded to the point that there was nothing left. They saw Murong Yu fall with their own eyes. Even if they didn't believe it, what could they do? "Senior Marshal Brother, Master won't die. I believe in him." Gu Kai supported Situ, Xian, who had faintly woken up. Although his face was pale, his expression was firm. At this time, Zhao Jiqing and the others had all woken up. Hearing Gu Kai's words, they shed tears. They also wanted to believe that Murong Yu did not fall, but the facts told them that was impossible. However, just as they were crying, they saw a smile appear on Murong Xian's face. Seeing this scene, Zhao Jiqing was instantly enraged. Her father had fallen, and as the son, he was actually smiling. This unfilial son. However, just as Zhao Jiqing was about to berate him, Murong Xian said, "Gu Kai is right. Father did not fall." Before Zhao Jiqing and the others could react, Murong Yu continued, "Look, the tribulation clouds in the sky have not dissipated. If Father had really fallen, those tribulation clouds would have dissipated long ago." Hearing this, everyone looked at the sky. Just like before, the tribulation clouds were still so thick, and the atmosphere was still so oppressive. Then what do we do now? Murong Lin looked at Murong Xian, still a little apprehensive. "Wait, Father will not fall so easily. Something special must have happened to him now. We can't help, we just need to wait. I believe Father will return soon, Murong Xian said with a firm expression. So, everyone looked at the distant, jade, desolate continent in the Divine Sea. No one approached to check. They were worried that if they went over, it would cause the tribulation to mutate. At that time, it would harm others and themselves. Although they were worried now, they knew that Murong Yu had not fallen, so it was much better than before. Then, did Murong Yu really fall? What was going on with him? Under the situation of using all kinds of magic treasures, his body was still shattered? Murong Yu was now encountering an unprecedented crisis. The power of the heavenly tribulation from before was beyond his imagination. It was so strong that his current physical body couldn't withstand it at all. However, if it was only like this, it was not an unprecedented crisis for Murong Yu. This tribulation was the 80th tribulation lightning. Murong Yu originally thought it was like this. However, he now knew that the tribulation lightning was the 80th tribulation lightning, which was also the 81st tribulation lightning. The two tribulation lightning blended together and blasted Murong Yu, almost taking his life. Moreover, the last tribulation lightning was aimed at the soul. At the same time, Murong Yu's body was shattered. His soul was also bombarded by the tribulation lightning. In such an instant, he was unprepared and his soul was directly shattered. At this time, if Zhao, Jiqing, and the others approached the place where he was transcending the tribulation, they would see his shattered soul. However, although his soul was shattered, it did not turn into ashes. Murong Yu had not fallen yet. He was still working hard to fuse his soul. His soul was blasted into billions of fragments. He was now piecing it together piece by piece and then slowly repairing it. Fortunately, it was not directly annihilated. Otherwise, I would really be dead. While piecing together his soul, Murong Yu thought in his heart and cursed. Even Hichu was wrongly accused by Murong Yu, because Hichu did not tell him that the last tribulation of the Holy Tribulation was actually a soul attack. In fact, Murong Yu blamed Hichu wrongly. Under normal circumstances, the Holy Tribulation did not target the soul. The reason why Murong Yu's Holy Tribulation was like this was probably because his soul had broken through to become a sage. Because there were too few people whose soul had broken through to become a sage, even Hichu did not know that there would be such a heavenly tribulation. However, Hichu was still wrong. If there were other experts whose soul had broken through, their holy tribulation would not be like this. The reason why Murong Yu's holy tribulation was like this was because of his soul. The soul of the hell ice flame was such a heaven-defying existence. The heavenly tribulation would definitely not let him go. His soul seems to have mutated again. Murong Yu, who was in the midst of repairing, suddenly exclaimed, because just now he suddenly realized that his slowly fusing soul seemed to be of a higher level than the hell ice flame. It had turned black. This is the color of chaos. Murong Yu was shocked. His soul had turned into chaos? Was there such a soul? Murong Yu immediately asked Hichu. Hichu did not know either, because the souls of Murong Yu's previous chaotic celestial bodies were ordinary souls. There was no mutation at all. What will happen if the soul mutates into chaos? Murong Yu was a little nervous. His soul turning into the hell ice flame was already very powerful and heaven-defying. If it directly mutated into chaos, Murong Yu could not imagine how terrifying it would be. Could it be that the final form of a chaotic celestial body is chaos? Otherwise, if the body is only strong and the soul is not as strong as the body, it will not be able to unleash the full power of the chaotic celestial body. Murong Yu frowned slightly. Hichu did not comment on this, because he did not know either. As the soul fragments continued to fuse, Murong Yu was more and more certain that his soul had mutated again. Moreover, at this time, he even felt that his soul was connected to chaos. It was the same as the Tree of Life. However, the Tree of Life was only rooted in chaos. His soul was connected to the endless chaos and even fused together. It was as if his soul was a part of chaos. Time passed slowly, and the tribulation clouds in the sky slowly dissipated. Murong Yu's tribulation had passed. However, watching the tribulation dissipate, Zhao Jiqing and the others were worried again. That was because they still had no news of Murong Yu. Did this mean that Murong Yu was gradually losing his vitality? Everyone was very anxious, but they did not know where to start and could only worry. I'm fine, just a little accident. You don't have to worry. When the tribulation clouds completely dissipated and everyone was anxious, Murong Yu's voice suddenly sounded in the ears of Zhao Jiqing, Murong Xian, and the others. What happened? What's wrong with you? Zhao Jiqing and the others hurriedly asked, but they did not hear a reply from Murong Yu. My soul is now broken, and I'm in the process of reforming it. It's very strenuous to transmit sound, and this will last for a long time. You guys go back to Shenzhen first. I'll be fine. After half a day, Murong Yu's voice sounded again. However, how could Zhao Jiqing and the others who were worried go back? After the others learned that Murong Yu was fine, they left the Jade Desolate Continent one after another, because there was nothing they could do to help. On the other hand, Murong Yu's family, Fantong, and some other brothers and friends had not left the Jade Desolate Continent. Just like that, 1,000 years passed. As time passed, Murong Yu did not find it so strenuous to speak. However, he only occasionally reported to Zhao Jiqing and the others that he was safe. The rest of the time, he worked hard to fuse and repair his broken soul. Finally, on this day, Murong Yu fused the last fragment into his soul. Boom! The moment he fused all the soul fragments, Murong Yu felt his soul shake. In the next moment, he entered a vast and unfamiliar space. Endless primal chaos. Immediately, Murong Yu cried out in surprise, because he saw a pure and powerful primal chaos airflow constantly flying around him like a torrent. The primal chaos energy was hundreds of millions of times purer than the primal chaos. In just a moment, Murong Yu felt that his soul and body had become much purer. However, although his soul and physical body had been strengthened, he still felt an enormous pressure coming at him. Whoosh! His body shook fiercely, and Murong Yu withdrew from the endless primal chaos. Then, he was shocked to find that his body, which had not improved for a long time, had become even more powerful. It was at least 10% stronger than before, and so was his soul. What a pity! Murong Yu sighed. If he could stay in the endless primal chaos for a little longer, his body might have reached the strength of a sacred body. Chapter 1204. Murong Yu's heart was filled with regret. However, he didn't know that he'd just communicated with the endless primal chaos. This kind of opportunity was hard to come by. No matter how powerful one was, it was difficult to communicate with the chaos, except for experts of certain realms who might be able to. However, there were too few experts who could communicate with the endless chaos. With a thought, a huge amount of chi of heaven and earth gathered. In the next moment, Murong Yu's body, which had been shattered for thousands of years, was condensed again. My body is at least 10% stronger than before. After successfully condensing his body, Murong Yu was surprised to find out. It could be said that his body had surpassed the level of a holy artifact, but it had not reached the level of a holy body. In other words, it was somewhere between the two. Murong, hooligan. Seeing Murong Yu appear in sight, Zhao Jiqing and the other 4 girls immediately cheered excitedly. In a flash, they had already rushed over. I'm sorry to have worried you. Murong Yu stretched out his big hands and hugged the 5 girls in his arms with a guilty look on his face. Big bad guy, you made us worry. Yu Mengqing looked at Murong Yu with tears in her eyes. The other girls also had tears in their eyes. Murong Yu felt guilty and could only keep comforting the girls. However, in the end, the 5 girls actually burst into tears. This made Murong Yu feel helpless. He was not afraid of anything except for his women's tears. As long as his women cried, he would be at a loss and wouldn't know what to do. Okay, aren't I fine? I won't die so easily. The juniors are watching. Murong Yu fell helpless and kept winking at Murong Xian and the others. Murong Xian and the others didn't know whether to laugh or cry. In many aspects, their father was very strong and domineering. However, in this aspect, of course, they all knew that this was a sign of their father's love for them. Otherwise, if they didn't love each other, Murong would have sent Zhao Jiqing and the others flying with a slap. Irritating, Murong Xian and the others helplessly came forward to help persuade them. In the end, after using all their means, they finally calmed down Zhao Jiqing and the other girls. As soon as the 5 girls quieted down, Kurlan immediately glared at Murong Yu and questioned him loudly. "Big pervert, why do you have to do this?" Zhao Jiqing and the others also glared at Murong Yu with murderous intent. Murong Yu's face immediately. Women, aren't their expressions changing a little too quickly? However, Murong Yu didn't say anything. Instead, he weakly said, "There's a small problem." "Little? Your soul jade slip is a big problem? What exactly is a big problem?" Yu Mengqin glared at Murong Yu. She was just short of giving him a few punches. "Aren't we undergoing the holy tribulation? It's normal for some accidents to happen." Murong Yu defended himself weakly. However, under the insistence of Zhao Jiqing and the others, his defense was useless. In the end, after being bombarded by the 5 girls for a long time, Murong Yu was dizzy from the bombardment. They returned to Shenzhen. At this time, Murong Yu could ascend to the holy world as long as he willed it, because he already felt the holy world calling to him. The holy world was waiting for him, but the human race, the demon race, and even the holy race might be waiting for him. Once he ascended, they might try to kill him. Therefore, Murong Yu's current goal was not to ascend. Before he had absolute confidence, he would not ascend. In any case, his lifespan was very long now. In the following time, Murong Yu used the excuse of consolidating his cultivation to stay with his family. He did the things he loved and guided the disciples of Murong Xian and Shenzhen in their cultivation. His days were very comfortable. However, perhaps because they knew that Murong Yu was about to ascend to the holy world, once he ascended, they did not know when they would be able to see each other again. Therefore, the 5 girls were very reluctant to part with him now, especially Kurlan and Situ Xian, who joined later. They were even more obsessed with Murong Yu. Every time, they would ask until they were exhausted. However, their strength was too high. It was extremely difficult to have child. Therefore, no matter how hard Murong Yu worked, he did not see the seed germinate. On this day, Murong Yu gathered all the quasi-saint in Shenzhen. These quasi-saint were all going to undergo tribulation. Moreover, the majority of Shenzhen were going to undergo tribulation. Murong Yu firmly believed this because he had become the lord of the holy world and could use the resources of the holy world at will. Although Murong Yu would not monopolize all the resources, it was normal for him to be attracted to Shenzhen. With the accumulation of these resources, the strength of Shenzhen's disciples would increase rapidly, and there would be people who could undergo tribulation. Today, Murong Yu is going to talk about his experience of holy tribulation. Although his holy world was too terrifying, at least it was experience. Everyone here has seen me undergo tribulation with their own eyes. Some of you have probably been scared by the terrifying tribulation. Before that, I can tell you that if you really do so, then you're not worthy of being Shenzhen's disciples and are not worthy of being called cultivators. As cultivators, we are supposed to go against the heavens. Saints are stronger than gods, and their lifespans are longer than gods. Once you reach the undying, indestructible realm, you will be immortal. That's true immortality. If there is anyone among you who is not willing to pursue true immortality, then you can leave now. At this point, Murong Yu stopped and looked at the 100 million quasi-saint with shining eyes. No one backed out. Just as he said, there was no cultivator who did not want to pursue greater power and a longer lifespan. And immortality was the pursuit of all cultivators. Very good. You all want to pursue immortality. But I can tell you that only a portion of you can reach the true, undying, indestructible realm. Holy tribulation is a threshold, and talent and hard work are also key. Let's not talk about talent and hard work for now. Today, we will only talk about holy tribulation. Many people are wondering if every holy tribulation is as terrifying as the one I went through. Murong Yu paused for a moment, swept his gaze across the crowd, and continued. What I can tell you is that your heavenly tribulations are far inferior to mine. Just like immortal tribulation and God tribulation, heavenly tribulation varies from person to person. You don't have to worry because you are Shangzhen's disciples. Before you go through your tribulation, we Shangzhen will do our best to help you succeed. Next, I will talk about my experience. But because my holy tribulation is different from yours, you can use it as a reference. In the following time, Murong Yu shared some of his experiences with the heavenly tribulation. He was often struck by lightning and had the most experience with heavenly tribulation. Aside from sharing the divine tribulation, Murong Yu also shared his cultivation experience, as well as the differences between saints and gods. When he talked about the benefits, many quasi-saint even sat down and entered a state of cultivation. This was because they all had an epiphany. Murong Yu even saw that some experts who had been stagnant at the peak of level 10 quasi-saint vaguely revealed a trace of saint aura. These people had 1 foot in the threshold of saint. It wouldn't take long. After Shangzhen and Murong Xian, more false saints would emerge. What? You're going to go through holy tribulation. When the 5 women heard that Murong Xian was going to go through heavenly tribulation in a few days, their faces immediately turned pale and exclaimed, Xiao Xian, are you really going to go through heavenly tribulation? Don't you want to think about it? Anyway, you still have a long lifespan. When it's about time, you can go through heavenly tribulation. Yu Mengqing grabbed Murong Xian's hand and said with a worried expression. Hearing this, Murong Xian didn't say anything, but Murong Yu's face darkened. As a stepmother, Yu Mengqing was really too outrageous. However, what made Murong Yu not know whether to laugh or cry was that in addition to Yu Mengqing, Mu Liu, Kurlan, and the others were also the same. Only Zhao Jiqing pondered and didn't say anything. You are not doing this for his own good. You are delaying him, understand? Murong Yu couldn't stand it anymore and said, Shut up. Yu Mengqing and the other 3 women looked at Murong Yu and said in unison. Murong Yu immediately shut up. In front of outsiders, these women were gentle and considerate. But at home, they were tigresses that couldn't be provoked. Otherwise, Murong Yu wouldn't be able to sleep in their beds, let alone sleep with them. At this moment, Zhao Jiqing suddenly said, 100 years later, 100 years should be enough for me to reach the pinnacle and undergo the tribulation. Murong Xian said without hesitation. Yu Mengqing and the other 3 women looked at Zhao Jiqing in shock. Big sister, you actually agreed to little Xian's tribulation? The tribulation is so terrifying. If something happens to little Xian, as a cultivator, you should have the spirit to face difficulties head on. The God realm is not our stage. Do you want to see your lifespans run out and die? Not just little Xian, but also me and you. Once the time is right, we will all undergo the tribulation. Otherwise, unless you are willing to be separated from your bones. Zhao Jiqing looked at the 4 women and said calmly. Hearing this, the 4 women were speechless. Murong Yu, on the other hand, nodded repeatedly. Zhao Jiqing lived up to her title as the big sister. She was more capable of making decisions. Thank you, mother. Murong Xian hurriedly thanked her. The reason why he was so happy was because if Zhao Jiqing and the others didn't agree to him undergoing the tribulation, he would have an inner demon during the tribulation. And once an inner demon appeared, it would be fatal to him. All right, but before you undergo the tribulation, you must be prepared. Big pervert, you have to prepare everything for little Xian. If anything happens to him, Kurlan turned to look at Murong Yu and snorted coldly. Murong Yu spat out a mouthful of tea. These women changed too quickly, right? Moreover, they didn't seem to be so concerned about him before the tribulation. Of course, this was what he wanted to see. And he also felt that the reason why the 5 women were acting like this was because they were scared of his tribulation. Chapter 1205. Murong Xian's holy tribulation had to be transcended. Not only him, but also the others. However, as the second person in Shenzhen to transcend the holy tribulation after Murongyu, he was highly valued. Especially Murongyu, Zhao, Jiqing, and the others, they were nervously preparing. In 100 years, Murongxian did nothing but consolidate his cultivation. Murongyu, on the other hand, used his divine ability to obtain all kinds of resources from Murongxian. Saint-grade divine tools, all kinds of top-grade divine veins, and all kinds of medicinal pills. Murongyu wanted to ensure that Murongxian would succeed in transcending the tribulation without any mishaps. If Murongxian failed to transcend the tribulation, Murongyu would still be able to bear the pain. However, Zhao Jiqing might not be able to bear it. This time, the location of transcending the tribulation was still the Jade Desolate Continent. Apart from Murongxian himself, Murongyu, Zhao Jiqing, and the others were all present. Even the other quasi-saint of Shenzhen were all present. Every holy tribulation was an experience. The more they saw, the more they would be able to transcend the tribulation in the future. Of course, this was because Murongyu was the master of the God realm. Otherwise, he would definitely not let more people know that Murongxian was transcending the tribulation. If there were disloyal people causing trouble, it would be a tragedy. Little Xian, take these 2 treasures. If you really can't withstand it, take out these 2 treasures. However, these 2 treasures are your final trump cards. I don't want you to use them, understand? Murongyu handed the 2 treasures to Murongxian and said in a deep voice. Murongxian nodded with a grave expression. Then, he took a step forward and rushed to the sky of the Jade Desolate Continent. Immediately, he released the seal on his body. Rumble, just like Murongyu's tribulation. The entire sky of the Jade Desolate Continent was shrouded in tribulation clouds after Murongxian's seal was released. However, when they saw the tribulation clouds, Zhao Jiqing and the others heaved a sigh of relief. Compared to when Murongyu was undergoing his tribulation, the aura emitted by the tribulation clouds had suppressed their souls to the point of trembling. Although the current tribulation cloud's pressure was terrifying, it was still much weaker than when Murongyu was undergoing his tribulation. Seeing this, Shenzhen and the other quasi-saint heaved a sigh of relief. Fortunately, not every tribulation is as terrifying as the Holy Lord's tribulation. Boom! The tribulation lightning struck down without hesitation. Murongxian hovered in the sky without dodging. Actually, he couldn't avoid these heavenly tribulations. He had to bear them. However, with Murongxian's strength, he easily withstood the first tribulation lightning without any threat. The might of the tribulation is still a little too strong. Hichu's voice suddenly appeared in Murongyu's ears. He had witnessed many people undergoing tribulation before. Murongyu's tribulation was more than 10 times more terrifying than that of ordinary saints. Murongxian's tribulation was also several times more powerful than that of ordinary people. Hearing Hichu's explanation, Murongyu was somewhat depressed. He didn't know whether to cry or to cry. The more terrifying the tribulation was, the more heaven-defying that person was. This should be a good thing. However, the might of the tribulation was doubled, making it difficult for people to safely pass it. However, Murongyu didn't tell Zhao, Jiqing, and the others about Hichu's words, lest they worry. Tribulation after tribulation struck down unceasingly. Murongyu and the others also witnessed Murongxian's strength. Before the 40 tribulation lightning struck down, Murongxian used his physical body to withstand it directly. Moreover, he also used the power of the tribulation lightning to temper his body in the process. Murongxian's physical body became stronger as he continued to transcend the tribulation. This was something that Murongyu and the others could see. However, after the 30 tribulation lightning, Murongxian was already struggling to withstand it. Every time the tribulation lightning struck down, some shocking wounds would appear on his body. If it were anyone else, they would have swallowed healing pills and taken out various magic treasures and divine artifacts to offset the power of the tribulation. However, Murong Xian didn't do so. During this process, Murong Yu and the others clearly saw inexplicable forces constantly coming from afar and acting on Murong Xian's body. With the help of these forces, Murong Xian's injuries would quickly heal. Those shocking, bone-deep wounds healed almost in the blink of an eye. What a terrifying recovery ability! Seeing this scene, everyone couldn't help but exclaim. While they were shocked, they were also confused. What exactly was that force that broke through the sky? Why was it acting on Murong Xian's body? Everyone was confused, but Murong Yu understood. If he guessed correctly, that force was the power of the Eastern Wilderness. Murong Xian was extracting the power of the Eastern Wilderness. The Eastern Wilderness was so big. Even though it had been dead for countless years, the power it contained was still quite terrifying. Moreover, the Eastern Wilderness was very powerful before it died. It was countless times more powerful than Murong Xian's. Therefore, its power could easily heal Murong Xian's injuries. After the 40th Tribulation Lightning, even with the healing power of the Eastern Wilderness, Murong Xian still had a hard time resisting it. The speed of healing even couldn't keep up with the speed of injury. Therefore, Murong Xian started swallowing all kinds of healing elixirs. These elixirs were specially made by Murong Yu using the yin-yang cauldron. They were all top-notch elixirs. Relying on the power of the Eastern Wilderness and these elixirs, Murong Xian managed to resist until the 60th Tribulation Lightning. However, the power of the Tribulation Lightning was getting more and more terrifying. Even with the support of the Eastern Wilderness and all kinds of elixirs, Murong Xian still couldn't resist it. At this time, there were still 21 more Tribulation Lightning to go. However, this didn't matter. Murong Xian's body couldn't withstand it, but he still had all kinds of divine artifacts and Dharma treasures. Therefore, everyone started to see Murong Xian taking out Dharma treasures and divine artifacts. In the beginning, the first stage of the heavenly tribulation could be blocked by a divine artifact or magic treasure. However, after one tribulation after another, he took out more and more Dharma treasures and divine artifacts each time. In the end, for each tribulation, Murong Xian had to take out dozens of divine artifacts before he could resist it. Seeing this, Shangzhen and the other quasi-saint disciples who were originally relieved felt their hearts in their mouths again. Murong Xian was Murong Yu's son, so he had so many divine artifacts and Dharma treasures. They were just ordinary disciples of Shangzhen. How could they have so many high-level divine artifacts? Looks like little Xian will pass the tribulation easily, Mu Liue said with a smile. Zhao Jiqing and the others nodded slightly. Although Murong Xian was in a terrible state, and his whole body was covered in blood, he wasn't in any life-threatening danger. Therefore, their hearts, which had been on tenterhooks all this time, finally relaxed. However, only Murong Yu's expression was serious. He knew that the last tribulation lightning was the key. Most people who went through the tribulation would die in the last tribulation lightning. Boom, boom, boom. The 80th tribulation lightning shattered the sky and shot towards Murong Xian. At this moment, Murong Xian's heart was enveloped by an extremely strong aura of death. His expression changed in an instant. At the same time, he took out hundreds of divine artifacts and Dharma treasures. Boom! With a loud bang, the hundreds of divine artifacts and Dharma treasures were directly shattered into dust by the tribulation lightning. However, the tribulation lightning continued to strike as if it wasn't damaged at all. Murong Xian let out a strange cry. With a thought, a huge ancient cauldron shot into the sky and met the tribulation lightning in the sky. The yin-yang cauldron. Boom! Before anyone could react, the yin-yang cauldron had already collided with the tribulation lightning and exploded with a terrifying force. In an instant, the yin-yang cauldron was blasted away. In the end, it shot towards Murong Yu. However, the yin-yang cauldron's power was undeniable. At least half of the tribulation lightning was destroyed. Whoosh! Almost at the same time that the yin-yang cauldron was blasted away, a picture scroll was taken out and swept towards the tribulation lightning. Phew! Zhao Jiqing and the others breathed a sigh of relief because the tribulation lightning was blocked by Murong Xian in the end. He used the Hichu Luo Shu. However, Murong Yu's expression didn't look good. Whether it was the Hichu Luo Shu or the Yin Cauldron, they could only be used once. After all, they were only borrowed. Once they were used, they would fly back to Murong Yu's side. Now, it was only the second last tribulation lightning. The last tribulation lightning was the most terrifying. What did Murong Xian use to block the last tribulation lightning? Whoosh! After successfully blocking the 80th tribulation lightning, before the last tribulation lightning struck, Murong Xian's figure disappeared into thin air. Everyone only saw Murong Xian tear open a void tunnel, step into it, and disappear. Instantly, everyone's expression changed. Zhao, Jiqing, and the others panicked, not knowing what had happened. All of you stay here. I'll be back soon. After Murong Xian disappeared, Murong Yu immediately transmitted a message to Zhao, Jiqing, and the others. Then, he disappeared in a flash. Eastern Wilderness World. At this moment, Murong Xian had been transported to the Eastern Wilderness World. When Murong Yu entered the Eastern Wilderness World, he saw that the murderous aura in the world was more than 1,000 times denser than before. Streams of terrifying auras were condensing crazily. Murong Yu nodded, and a smile appeared on his serious face. Murong Xian was very smart. He knew that he couldn't block the last tribulation with the things he had. Therefore, he entered the Eastern Wilderness World. He wanted to use the power of the Eastern Wilderness World to block the last tribulation, which was also the most terrifying tribulation. Just as Murong Yu entered the Eastern Wilderness World, the last tribulation lightning struck. At this moment, an extremely strong aura of death appeared in the hearts of all living beings in the Eastern Wilderness World. In an instant, the entire Eastern Wilderness World felt like doomsday had arrived. It was extremely terrifying. This tribulation affected the entire Eastern Wilderness World. One could imagine how terrifying it was. Would Murong Xian be able to withstand the last tribulation? Could he successfully pass the tribulation and become a saint? Chapter 1206. The moment the heavenly tribulation struck down, Murong Yu suddenly discovered that the sky of the eastern wasteland was suddenly drowned by a terrifying, baleful aura. The sky, which was originally a little gray, was now completely dark. This was because there was too much baleful aura. In addition, Murong Yu also saw streaks of blood-red, divine light flying over from all directions of the eastern wasteland. These should be the remaining forces of the Eastern Wasteland. Murong Xian was gathering these remaining forces. In fact, these forces were not what Murong Xian wanted to use. After being summoned by him, they began to condense above his head and continued to condense. Most of the forces had already met the terrifying tribulation lightning in the sky. Rumble, the last tribulation lightning, was very terrifying. Even though the Eastern Wasteland's forces were huge and incomparably powerful, it was still difficult to resist this tribulation lightning. However, the Eastern Wasteland's forces were really huge and could be said to be endless. Under Murong Xian's control, these forces were like a torrential river that crazily pounced forward. Although they were unable to withstand a single blow, they would still weaken some of the tribulation lightning's power. Seeing this scene, Murong Yu was already relieved. He knew that Murong Xian's tribulation had passed safely. Not to mention that Murong Xian was using the Eastern Wasteland's forces to transcend the tribulation, Zhao, Jiqing, and the others. Murong Xian and Murong Yu left one after another, causing Zhao, Jiqing, and the others to be worried. The more they did not know the situation, the more worried they were. As for the other quasi-saint of Shenzhen, they were not necessarily happy either. After all, Murong Xian was also an expert of Shenzhen. Shenzhen was the second person to transcend the tribulation. His position in Shenzhen was also extremely high. No one was willing to see him fall. Therefore, everyone did not leave the Jade Wasteland continent. Before they received news that Murong Xian had successfully transcended the tribulation, they would not leave. Fortunately, although Murong Xian had left the Jade Desolate Continent, nothing unexpected had happened to his soul jade slip. Because of this, Zhao Jiqing and the others were not so worried. Even so, they couldn't help but worry. Little Xian, it shouldn't be a problem, right? Situ Xian asked with a slight frown. They were all family, so it was normal for them to be concerned about Murong Xian. There should be no problem, Zhao Jiqing said affirmatively. However, deep within her eyes, a trace of deep worry flashed past. As a mother, she couldn't be completely at ease until she was sure that Murong Xian was safe and sound. He will definitely be fine. Everyone thought to themselves. He seemed to be comforting the others, but at the same time, he seemed to be comforting himself. While they were worrying, Murong Xian's heavenly tribulation in the eastern wilderness had already disappeared. The entire eastern wilderness had also returned to normal. Since then, Shenzhen already had 2 people who had passed the holy tribulation. As long as the father and son ascended, they would be the first saints in Shenzhen to ascend. With one step, Murong Yu had already arrived in front of Murong Xian. Father, seeing Murong Yu arrive, Murong Xian hurriedly bowed respectfully. Murong Yu nodded and looked at Murong Xian. He found that his aura was several times stronger than before the heavenly tribulation. Of course, Murong Xian was still only a false saint. As long as he reached the holy realm and condensed a saint body, he would be able to unleash the true power of a saint. Of course, a saint body wasn't the only thing. Most importantly, his current power was only divine power. In essence, divine power was many times weaker than saint power. A saint could only unleash the strongest attack if they had a set of saint power. If you had gone through the heavenly tribulation in the eastern wilderness from the beginning, you wouldn't have been in such a sorry state, and you wouldn't have used so many treasures. Why didn't you just go through the heavenly tribulation here? This was Murong Yu's first sentence, and it was somewhat interrogative. However, Murong Xian shook his head and looked determined. Father, do you think it's useful for me to go through the heavenly tribulation like this? I need to truly face the heavenly tribulation and use my own power to go through it. Only then can I train my strength, temperament, courage, and other aspects. If I had gone through the heavenly tribulation here from the beginning, I could have gone through it safely and even come out unscathed. However, that's not what I want. But you're making your mother and the others too worried. Murong Yu continued in a low voice. However, Murong Xian smiled. Father, if it were you, would you be willing to go through the heavenly tribulation here directly? Moreover, I already had a plan. If I really couldn't handle it, I would have come here. Didn't I come here now? A bright smile appeared on Murong Yu's face. He patted Murong Xian's shoulder a few times and said with a smile, Good job. As expected of my son, Murong Yu. My son is a coward. Don't you know whose son I am? Murong Xian smiled. Murong Yu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. This guy was calling him fat, and he was panting. However, no matter what, today was a good day for Murong Xian to go through the heavenly tribulation. It was worth celebrating. Thus, he said, Now, go back to the Jade Wilderness and tell your mother that you're safe. Then, tell the world that in a few days, you can share your experience of going through the heavenly tribulation. The main thing is that they know the difference between different heavenly tribulations. It's time for us to enter the holy world. Father, are we preparing to ascend? Murong Xian was overjoyed. To them who had gone through the heavenly tribulation, the holy world was their final stage. There's no rush. Let's make preparations first. We're going to enter the holy world. I'll be the first to scout the way. Murong Yu said in a deep voice. The situation in the heavenly realm was too complicated. That definitely wouldn't welcome outsiders. Originally, it was just Shenzhen who hated those who ascended. Now, with the addition of the humans and demons in the holy world, the entire holy world hated those from the heavenly realm. If they rashly ascended, it would definitely be a tragedy. It would be best if they did what Murong Yu did in the past. He would ascend first and then slowly develop in the holy world. After having a certain foundation, Shenzhen's people would ascend one after another. Murong Xian immediately felt depressed. However, He also knew the seriousness of the situation. Immediately, he and Murong Yu entered Hichu Luoshu and returned to the Jade Wilderness. Seeing Murong Xian, who had successfully passed the heavenly tribulation, Zhao Jiqing and the others were naturally overjoyed. Soon, they returned to Shenzhen. Then, the news of Murong Xian's successful tribulation quickly spread throughout the heavenly realm under Shenzhen's promotion. Moreover, the heavenly realm also knew that all the disciples of Shenzhen would soon share Murong Xian's tribulation experience. Regarding this, they were naturally envious and jealous. However, there was nothing they could do. Who asked them not to be Shenzhen's disciples? However, the more it was like this, the more people wanted to enter Shenzhen. Shenzhen fully deserved to become the cultivation holy land of the heavenly realm. 1,000 years after Murong Xian's tribulation, Shenzhen finally welcomed the third person to undergo tribulation. This person was originally a peak 10th level quasi-saint in the heaven domain. With Shenzhen's support, this person successfully passed the heavenly tribulation. Moreover, everyone also discovered that this person's heavenly tribulation was too weak compared to Murong Yu and his sons. This was because this expert was far inferior to Murong Yu and his son. However, this also made it very difficult for this saint to pass the heavenly tribulation. He even almost died. However, in the end, he still successfully passed the tribulation. With a third, there would naturally be a fourth and a fifth. In the following time, quasi-saints who were undergoing tribulation continuously appeared in Shenzhen. However, not everyone could succeed in transcending the tribulation. With Shenzhen's help, among the 10 people who passed the tribulation, 2 still failed. The success rate of passing the tribulation was 80%. It seemed that the success rate was not very high. However, compared to the past, it was much higher. Because before this, it was extremely difficult to successfully pass the tribulation. Most people would die under the heavenly tribulation, but Shenzhen's current situation was that most people had successfully passed the tribulation. This was the difference. Moreover, now that everyone in Shenzhen was getting stronger and stronger, the success rate of passing the tribulation in the future would also be higher and higher. This was inevitable. In a flash, an era had passed. An era's time was very long for Murong Yu, because before this, he had not even spent 10 million years. However, in this era, thousands of false saints had appeared in Shenzhen. They were all false saints who had passed the heavenly tribulation. In fact, the number of people who had passed the heavenly tribulation was far more than this number. It was just that many people had died. Moreover, there would be people who would pass the tribulation almost every few decades or centuries. There would be more and more saints in Shenzhen. It's time to ascend to the holy world. On this day, Murong Yu made a decision. With a flash, he disappeared from Shenzhen and appeared in the chaotic secret ground. Kid, you finally appeared. The moment Murong Yu appeared, Lu Haozong appeared beside him. Murong Yu rolled his eyes. Old Lu, you don't think I've already ascended to the holy world, do you? Lu Haozong blushed and smiled embarrassedly. He was really afraid that Murong Yu would ascend to the holy world alone without him. Murong Yu immediately looked at Lu Haozong with disdain. Do you think I'm the kind of person who doesn't keep his promise? Ha ha ha! Lu Haozong suddenly laughed out loud, hiding his embarrassment and changing the topic. You've passed the tribulation for an era. Are you preparing to ascend to the holy world? Murong Yu nodded. Lu Haozong was immediately overjoyed. He thought he could use Hichu Luoshu to ascend to the holy world. However, what Murong Yu said next made Lu Haozong depressed. Old Lu, can you return to the holy world from where you entered the chaotic secret ground? You want to sneak into the holy world from the chaotic secret ground? Lu Haozong looked at Murong Yu in surprise before shaking his head. As a matter of fact, Murong Yu even saw a smear of fear on Lu Haozong's face. The other side of the chaotic secret ground was just too terrifying. Lu Haozong definitely did not want to experience it a second time. Chapter 1207. Seeing the fear on Lu Haotsong's face, Murong was secretly surprised. This guy was not a weakling, but a genuine undead stage powerhouse. He was already in immortal existence. It was not easy for this kind of person to die. But just talking about the depths of the chaotic secret plane, he was scared to this extent? How terrifying was the chaotic secret plane? Murong was shocked, and even his thoughts were shaken. The chaotic secret plane in the God world is also a secret plane in the Holy World. And do you know where the exit is in the Holy World? It's in the Blood Rain Mountain. Seeing that Murong still wanted to pass through the chaotic secret plane, Lu Haotsong hurriedly explained. Murong just looked at him doubtfully, because he did not know what the Blood Rain Mountain was. Is the Blood Rain Mountain a danger zone? Murong asked. Lu Haotsong shook his head, and a cold light flashed in his eyes. The Blood Rain Mountain is not a danger zone, but a force. If it was not a danger zone, then it would be easy to deal with. Murong looked at Lu Haotsong with some hesitation, not knowing why he thought like this. Lu Haotsong smiled bitterly and said, "Do you know how I ended up in this situation? Because before this, I killed the young master of the Blood Rain Mountain." Murong came to a realization. This guy killed the young master of the Blood Rain Mountain, so he was hunted down by the Blood Rain Mountain. But was the Blood Rain Mountain really so terrifying? They actually made Lu Haotsong have no foothold in the God world, and finally escaped into the chaotic secret plane? Seeing Murong's expression, Lu Haotsong knew what he was thinking and explained. In the Saint's world, even if the Blood Rain Mountain is a human, it's only an ordinary power. Hearing this, Murong immediately looked at Lu Haotsong with contempt. This guy was actually chased by an ordinary force to the point that he had no foothold in the Holy World. Was the opponent too strong, or was Lu Haotsong too useless? Lu Haotsong smiled bitterly. "I know what you're thinking. It's not that I'm too useless, nor is it that the Blood Rain Mountain is too strong. The old ancestor of the Blood Rain Mountain was only a 9th stage profound sage. He's just a whole realm higher than me. However, the Blood Rain Mountain has a very disgusting divine ability, Blood Curse." "Blood Curse?" Murong exclaimed. "Wasn't there a Blood Gate in the divine world?" The Blood Gate had a similar Blood Curse. Every disciple of the Blood Gate had a Blood Curse on them. Whenever someone killed them, the Blood Curse on them would be transferred to the other party's soul. Those who were cursed would be sensed by the disciples of the Blood Sect within a certain range. And this Blood Curse was almost unbreakable. Back then, Murong had also been cursed by the Blood Curse and was almost hunted down by the people of the Blood Sect. Fortunately, his life force was powerful enough to remove the Blood Curse. In the end, the furious Murong directly uprooted the Blood Gate. If the Blood Rain Mountain was similar to the Blood Gate, this force would definitely be a very disgusting existence. However, the Blood Curse could only be sensed by the disciples of the Blood Gate within a certain range. If this was the case, the Holy World was so big. Lu Haotsong could casually find a place to hide, and they wouldn't be able to find him. Lu Haotsong stared at Murong with a look of disdain. "Do you think the Blood Curse of the Blood Rain Mountain is just like this? The Blood Curse of the Blood Rain Mountain is much more disgusting than the Blood Gate of the Divine World. As long as I'm still in the Holy World, their old ancestor can sense my existence. Damn, that old bastard relied on his strength and chased me for countless years. I almost lost my life in his hands several times. If it wasn't for my good luck that caught them off guard and rushed into the chaotic secret land, I'm afraid I would have died long ago." With that, Lu Haotsong gnashed his teeth. The division of realms in the Holy World was somewhat different from the Divine World. Every big realm was subdivided into 9 small realms. The gap between each small realm was at least 10 times. For example, the gap between a first-order undead sage and a 9th-order undead sage was at least 90 times. If there was a difference of a big realm, the gap would be at least 100 times or hundreds of times. Of course, if it was a genius, it would be different. The gap might be reduced. But if the other party was a genius, the gap would be even bigger. Lu Haotsong was very unlucky. Although the old ancestor of the Blood Rain Mountain was only a 9th-order profound sage, he was a genius. With a difference of a big realm, The gap between their strength was more than 1,000 times. It was precisely because of this that Lu Haotsong was being chased. Morongyu looked at Lu Haotsong with sympathy. "Old Lu, I sympathize with you." Lu Haotsong rolled his eyes. What was the use of sympathy? It would be good if he could help him kill that guy. However, Lu Haotsong didn't have that strength. Once he appeared in the holy world, the other party would immediately sense it. This was also the reason why he chose to cooperate with Morongyu. If he hid in Morongyu's Hichu Luo Shu, the other party might not be able to sense his existence. Moreover, if he waited until Morongyu became stronger and killed the other party, he wouldn't have to worry about anything. Those blood curses are so terrifying. Morongyu didn't believe it. Ordinary blood curses aren't that powerful, but the person I killed wasn't an ordinary person. This is a strengthened version of a blood curse. Lu Haotsong said helplessly. However, if he was given a choice, he would still kill the young master of the Blood Rain Mountain, because he deserved to die. Well, after I become stronger, I will go and kill that old ancestor and destroy the Blood Rain Mountain. Morongyu patted Lu Haotsong's shoulder and said. Lu Haotsong smiled helplessly. I hope so. Isn't that what he was thinking? However, it's still a problem whether we can go to the chaotic secret plane or not. Lu Haotsong said with a frown. We have to go even if we can't. Morongyu narrowed his eyes slightly. He couldn't ascend at all. Once he did, the people of the holy world would definitely attack him. Therefore, he could only rely on the chaotic secret plane. Of course, if there were other secret planes that were connected to the holy world, he wouldn't need to go through the chaotic secret plane at all. However, he didn't find that secret plane. After discussing with Lu Haotsong for a long time, Morongyu left the chaotic secret plane. It's not that he didn't want to pass through here, but he had decided to pass through the chaotic secret plane. This time, he left the chaotic secret plane to go back and make preparations. Going to the holy world? After hearing this news, Zhao Jiqing and the others were shocked. However, this was also within their expectations. After all, Morongyu had already passed the holy tribulation for an epoch. For the rest of the time, Morongyu and the girls were madly entangled with each other while making arrangements for various matters. After 100 years, Morongyu finally entered the chaotic secret plane again. Are you ready? When they arrived at the chaotic secret plane, Lu Haotsong asked with a solemn expression. Morongyu nodded, then soared into the sky and flew towards the depths of the chaotic secret plane. He didn't hesitate when he decided on something. Both of them were very powerful, and their speed was even more terrifying. Although the chaotic secret plane was extremely vast, they still approached the depths of the chaotic secret plane after a few years. According to Lu Haotsong's understanding, they weren't in the deepest part of the chaotic secret plane. Instead, they were still at the edge of the chaotic secret plane. It was like a mountain had divided the chaotic secret plane into two halves. One side was connected to the divine world, while the other side was connected to the holy world. Even though they were only at the edge, the chaotic chi flow here was extremely violent. At this moment, Morongyu had already summoned the He-Tu and the Luo Shu to resist the incomparably berserk chaotic air currents. Even though he was a chaotic celestial body and was innately close to the chaotic chi. However, the violent chaotic chi flow was not something he could resist. He couldn't even absorb it. Are we sure we want to go in? Lu Haotsong looked at Morongyu. Nonsense. Morongyu glared at Lu Haotsong, somewhat speechless. This guy had asked many times along the way. How many chaotic divine veins have you collected? None, Lu Haotsong said directly. Then, before Morongyu lost his temper, he continued, when you reach the holy world, you will condense a holy body. At that time, these chaotic divine veins will have no effect on you. If we can reach the other side, the chaotic divine veins there will be useful to you. Morongyu nodded and stepped in. Boom! Just as he was about to enter the depths, a powerful force slammed into his body. He was caught off guard and was sent flying. At that moment, Morongyu's body felt like it was hit by a holy mountain. His physical body instantly cracked, almost shattering into pieces. Morongyu was shocked. Immediately, he erupted with his strongest power, causing his entire body to sink down. At the same time, the power of life had already rushed in. Under the impact of the power of life, his injured body immediately recovered to its peak state. At the same time, he successfully protected his body with his power. However, he was still being hit by the chaotic chi. At that moment, he looked around. However, he didn't find anything. The chaotic chi flow here was the same as before. However, Murong felt as if he'd entered a river of primal chaos chi. It looked calm, but the undercurrent was turbulent. It was the turbulent undercurrent that was attacking him. Do you know how powerful it is? The deeper you go, the more terrifying the impact is. Let me tell you, there are no terrifying beasts in this chaotic secret site, only these violent chaotic chi flows. Lu Haotsong came to Murong Yu's side and said in a deep voice. Murong Yu rolled his eyes and looked at Lu Haotsong. Suddenly, a smile appeared on his face. You're an imperishable stage expert. I think it'll be fine for you to cross this place by yourself. I will enter the space treasure first. Lu Haotsong rolled his eyes, but in the end, Murong Yu didn't go in. Wasn't this harsh environment a good place to cultivate? Therefore, Murong Yu and Lu Haotsong began to rush into the depths of the chaotic secret site. Chapter 1208. The chaotic airflow surged, and every moment, it was as if there was a huge, sacred mountain slamming into Murong Yu's body. The huge impact made it impossible for Murong Yu to fly in a straight line, and he could only stumble forward. However, this was not enough to injure him, but his speed was greatly hindered. However, his speed was still extremely fast. Alas, the secret ground was simply too big. The side that bordered the God Realm was probably just the tip of the iceberg. Murong Yu had been flying in the chaotic secret land for decades, but they had not crossed the depths. According to Lu Haotsong, they had not yet reached the deepest part. Of course, the deepest part he mentioned was not the entire chaotic secret land. Instead, it was the deepest part of the natural moat that separated the two exits of the chaotic secret land. The deeper they went, the more terrifying the chaotic airflow was. Lu Haotsong was fine. After all, he was an imperishable stage super expert. Although his physical body was not very advanced, it was still a saint body. However, Murong Yu was different. His physical body was far inferior to a saint body, and his strength was not comparable to an ordinary saint. Therefore, after 100 years, he had begun to struggle a little. Every moment, he had to spend a lot of energy to suppress his body and resist the chaotic airflow. Boy, you should enter your treasure space. I will take you to the next level. Lu Haotsong looked at Murong Yu with a surprised face, because at this time, they were already quite deep. Not to mention Murong Yu, who was a fake saint. Even a real saint would not be able to resist it. Murong Yu shook his head. This was far from the limit. Moreover, they were not in a hurry to go to the Holy World. It was better to use this rare opportunity to train himself. Therefore, he continued to go deeper and deeper. After another few decades, Murong Yu finally reached his limit. At this time, even with the protection of Hichu Luo Shu, his body was constantly cracked by the impact. Even the life force couldn't repair it in time. This was because the speed of repair wasn't as fast as the speed of injury. Moreover, even if he devoured the primal chaos divine veins with all his might, he wouldn't be able to make up for the energy he had consumed. Old Lu, I can't take it anymore. For the rest of the time, you will travel through this place alone, Murong Yu said, and his figure flashed and entered the Hichu Luo Shu. Then, Hichu Luo Shu attached itself to Lu Haotsong's body. Without saying a word, Lu Haotsong once again flew into the depths of the forest. Saints, great saints, undying saints, and so on. In the end, Lu Haotsong had reached the depths of the chaotic secret plane that could harm eternal realm experts. For Lu Haotsong, this was just the beginning. The deeper one went into the primal chaos secret lands. The more violent the primal chaos chi became. Even profound sages, ancient sages and other powerhouses could easily destroy it. Lu Haozong stopped. Seeing that Lu Haozong had stopped, Murong couldn't help but ask, "Have you left the depths?" "This is just the beginning," Lu Haozong replied snappily. Then he closed his eyes and recalled. The reason why he was able to pass through this terrifying depths was that he had taken a relatively safe passage. After recalling his memories and confirming that there were no mistakes, Lu Haozong continued to move forward. At this time, Murong was also looking out of the Hichu Luo Shu. Seeing the dignified look on Lu Haozong's face, his face also became dignified. Here, the Hichu Luoshu's teleportation function didn't work at all. In other words, once they encountered danger, they could only enter the Hichu Luoshu world, but they couldn't teleport out of here. Chi! A soft sound came from Lu Haozong's body. Murong looked over and saw that Lu Haozong's clothes had been torn to shreds. In an instant, several ghastly wounds appeared on his body. Murong was startled, and Lu Haozong was even more frightened. His figure flashed and retreated. "Old Lu, what's wrong?" Seeing Lu Haozong retreating to a safe place, Murong immediately asked. "It's nothing, I just accidentally stepped on the wrong path," Lu Haozong said lightly. In fact, his heart was extremely heavy. Just now, he had walked along the path in his memory, but he had accidentally stepped on the wrong path. If it weren't for his quick reaction, he might not have just been injured, he might have even lost his life. When Lu Haozong was about to heal his injuries, Murong hurriedly said, "Save your strength. I'll help you heal your injuries." As he spoke, his life force had already crazily surged into Lu Haozong's body like stormy waves. However, the healing effect was barely satisfactory, because Murong was only a false saint, and Lu Haozong was an existence of the eternal realm. However, there was still an effect. It took him a full hour to heal Lu Haozong's injuries. Thus, Lu Haozong went deeper again. However, this time, he was much more careful than before. He almost stopped 3 times per step. Such a speed was naturally extremely slow. Along the way, Lu Haozong made mistakes from time to time. His memory was correct, but after so many years, the illusion here had also undergone some changes. However, under his carefulness and Murong treatment, they still went deep into the illusion without any danger. After passing through the eternal realm, they came to an area where profound sages could be killed. At this point, Lu Haozong slowed down and became even more careful. There's a wormhole nearby. When they came to a valley, Lu Haozong stopped. Murong finally came to a realization. He had been wondering how Lu Haozong had been able to pass through these places. Moreover, he was being chased. It turned out that he was teleported through a wormhole. "How did you find this wormhole at that time?" Murong couldn't help but ask, because at this time, Lu Haozong had already found this wormhole. This wormhole was very hidden, and it was actually hidden in the depths of an inconspicuous cave in the valley where they were. Hearing this, Lu Haozong's old face turned red. At that time, he didn't find this wormhole. In fact, when he entered the other entrance of the chaotic secret plane, he was chased by the old ancestor of the Blood Rain Mountain. At that time, he was hit by a palm and almost lost his life. However, that palm strike had coincidentally sent him into the wormhole and teleported him to this valley. If he wanted to, Lu Haozong would never cross the chaotic secret plane. The reason why he came to the side bordering the divine realm. That was because he had no way back. Go back through the wormhole. There must have been an inescapable net waiting for him over there. But directly cross it? Lu Haozong admitted that he didn't have the strength. Murong couldn't help but feel strange. "You can come over, but why didn't the people of the Blood Rain Mountain chase after you?" Lu Haozong was startled. He had been struggling with this question for a long time. It's probably because they don't want to take the risk. Who knows where the other side of the wormhole leads to? If it leads to an existence that can even kill a Saint King, they would be in for a tragedy. They might even think that I'm already dead. It's also possible. Murong pondered for a moment. And felt that this was the only possibility. Immediately, he put Lu Haozong into the Hichu Luo Shu. If there were any inescapable net or formation restrictions over there, only Murong you could take action, because he could be invisible and was not afraid of various formations. Swish! Murong Yu and Lu Haotsong flew directly into the wormhole in the Hichu Luo Shu. Perhaps it was a moment, or perhaps it was several eras. Murong Yu felt the scenery in front of him change, and then he came out of the void. We finally left the depths of the damned, chaotic secret plane. When he saw the weak, chaotic airflow outside, Lu Haotsong couldn't help but curse. At the same time, a smile appeared on his face. This was because they already had one foot in the Saint's world. Rumble. However, before Lu Haotsong's voice fell, balls of dazzling holy light erupted outside the Hichu Luo Shu. Waves of vast power swept in from all directions, strangling the Hichu Luo Shu. Lu Haotsong's voice came to an abrupt halt. These bastards really set up an inescapable net here. Murong Yu also felt a little helpless. Hichu Luo Shu triggered the formation. These formations were set up in the wormhole. As long as one came out of the wormhole, they would be triggered. Of course, if Murong Yu himself appeared, these formations would not be triggered at all. But, with a thought, Murong Yu stepped out of the Hichu Luo Shu world and appeared in the chaotic secret plane of the divine realm. Boom! A huge pressure was exerted on his body, directly suppressing his body that was suspended in the void and forcing him to fall to the ground. However, the moment he appeared, he also put away the He-Tu and the Luo Shu. The formations that were triggered instantly calmed down. However, at the same time, Murong Yu's figure disappeared on the spot, invisible. At the same time, when these formations were triggered outside the chaotic secret plane in the depths of the Blood Rain Mountain, an old ancestor who was sitting cross-legged in cultivation suddenly opened his eyes. The formations of the chaotic secret plane were triggered. Could it be that Lu Haotsong, that bastard, is not dead and has returned? Thinking so, the old ancestor disappeared in a flash. When he reappeared, he had already entered the chaotic secret plane. Unlike the chaotic secret plane of the divine realm, the chaotic secret plane here could be entered and exited at any time. Of course, the premise was that only those who had mastered the method of entering and exiting could do so. The moment Murong Yu turned invisible, an incomparably huge and terrifying aura rushed over from afar. In an instant, 1.08 billion hairs on Murong Yu's body stood on end. His whole body felt like it was about to explode. It was very terrifying. Murong Yu's expression changed immediately, and he immediately entered the Hichu Luo Shu world. At the same time, Hichu Luo Shu turned into a particle, floating between heaven and earth. Chapter 1209. His divine sense swept over like a tidal wave. Just as Murong Yu entered Hichu Luo Shu and hid Hichu Luo Shu, he felt that terrifying divine sense sweep over Hichu Luo Shu. At this moment, Murong Yu's body shook violently. Whether it was his soul, mind, or body, it was as if someone had whipped him. One should know that this was because he was in Hichu Luo Shu world. If he was directly affected by this divine sense, Murong Yu firmly believed that he would not be able to withstand it for even a moment, and he might explode and die. What level of sage is this? Just a divine sense is so terrifying? The gap between a sage and a god is too big. Murong Yu's face was full of shock, and his heart was filled with horror. Whoosh! While he was thinking, a figure stepped out of the void and appeared in Murong Yu's sight. When he saw the person, Murong Yu noticed that Lu Haotsong's body was trembling. Waves of terrifying, murderous aura were constantly erupting from his body, and the impact caused the Hichu Luo Shu world space to continuously collapse. At this moment, Lu Haotsong was even more like a ferocious beast. His eyes were red, and waves of ferocious aura were erupting from him. Old Lu, suppress your anger. Seeing this, Murong Yu hurriedly roared. He too and the Book of the Luo were able to withstand Lu Haotsong. However, If this guy were to erupt his strength, he would still be able to annihilate the Hichu Luoshu's space. It's that old bastard Blood Rain ancestor. Lu Haozong gritted his teeth and said, but the murderous aura on his body gradually weakened. However, the murderous aura was still violent. Blood Rain Patriarch? Morongyu narrowed his eyes and looked at the person who had appeared out of thin air. Ancestor Blood Rain was the strongest ancestor of the Blood Rain Mountain. His strength had reached the 9th rank Profound Sage, and he was extremely terrifying. Morongyu, on the other hand, saw a young man who was about 25 or 26 years old. The young man, Patriarch Blood Rain, was standing on the ground. His eyes shone with holy light as he looked in the direction of the wormhole. Morongyu even felt the other party's gaze sweep past Hichu Luoshu. Morongyu's body trembled violently. It was as if his entire body was being pierced by millions of needles at the same time. It was also as if someone was burning him. Is this the strength of a profound sage? Morongyu was shocked. The other party was only looking at Hichu Luoshu. If he had directly looked at Morongyu, Morongyu would have been annihilated. No movement at all? In that case, what triggered this array formation? It hasn't been triggered for countless years. Blood Rain Patriarch stood in place, frowning as he pondered. Meanwhile, his divine consciousness was constantly scanning the surroundings. However, he didn't find anything. On the other hand, Morongyu was a little scared, because the other party's divine sense had scanned Hichu Luoshu many times. However, perhaps because Hichu Luoshu was hidden too well, the other party didn't discover it. However, Morongyu didn't see any intention of the other party to leave. Therefore, Morongyu didn't dare to move casually. Once they were discovered, they would be finished here. One day, I will kill him. Looking at Blood Rain Patriarch, Lu Haozong couldn't help but feel the killing intent in his heart. Blood Rain Patriarch suddenly seemed to have sensed something. He snorted, and his eyes shot over like a knife. Morongyu jumped in fright and hastily closed the He Tu and Luo scroll. At the same time, he glared at Lu Haozong and said angrily, "Do you want to die?" Lu Haozong was also shocked and quickly suppressed his killing intent. Once they were discovered, the two of them wouldn't be able to escape. I seem to feel the killing intent here, Blood Rain Patriarch muttered. However, Morongyu and Lu Haozong were so scared that they broke out in cold sweat. This was because Blood Rain Patriarch's eyes were fixed on Hichu Luoshu's position with a puzzled expression. Morongyu and Lu Haozong didn't dare to move. They didn't even dare to breathe. Just like this, the two sides confronted each other for a long time. After half a day, Blood Rain Patriarch didn't seem to have found anything and gave up. Therefore, his figure flashed and he left this place. Mother of Asterisker, this person is really too terrifying. Just by standing there, I felt my heart tremble. Terrifying. Morongyu wiped the non-existent cold sweat on his forehead and said with a sigh of relief, "Otherwise, do you think that sages are only sages in the lower realm? When you see a real sage, you will know what a real sage is." Lu Haozong looked at Morongyu with disdain. Morongyu smiled indifferently and said, "Then we will know when we see." At the same time, he was about to control Hichu Luoshu and leave this place. However, his shoulder was suddenly pressed down by Lu Haozong and said, "Wait a moment. That old bastard is very cunning. At this time, he might be secretly observing this place." Morongyu was shocked and looked at Lu Haozong with suspicion. "Don't look at me. I know that old bastard. I wasn't chased for so many years for nothing." However, Morongyu was still skeptical. However, he didn't immediately leave. In any case, they didn't lack this little bit of time. However, they waited for more than a month. He should have left long ago, right? Morongyu said with some hesitation. Lu Haozong was also somewhat hesitant. However, to be on the safe side, he decided to wait a few more days. Sure enough, after another 3 days, Patriarch Blood Rain suddenly appeared. This gave Morongyu a fright. This Blood Rain ancestor is really sinister. He is actually hiding here. Morongyu gritted his teeth and felt that this Blood Rain ancestor was really shameless. However, what if it was him? Muronyu felt that he might do the same. I was right. This bastard is really sinister, Lu Haotsong said with a sigh of relief. Muronyu nodded in agreement. It seems that there is really no one here. Lu Haotsong, that bastard, should have died long ago, right? Blood Rain Ancestor muttered to himself. Lu Haotsong immediately gritted his teeth. You are the one who is dead. Your whole family is dead. After observing for a while, Blood Rain Ancestor finally left. Half a day later, Muronyu was ready to leave. However, he was stopped by Lu Haotsong. He turned to look at Lu Haotsong, only to see Lu Haotsong shaking his head. Muronyu was helpless, so he continued to hide. Until half a year later, Blood Rain Ancestor appeared again. This guy was really too careful. He had actually waited for almost a year. After leaving this time, Lu Haotsong signaled Muronyu to prepare to leave. However, this time, it was Murongyu's turn to be careful. In the end, they decided to stay and cultivate for several years before finally leaving. We have reached the holy world. These primal chaos divine veins, or should I say primal chaos saint veins, can be collected. After leaving the wormhole, Muronyu let Lu Haotsong out. I hope Blood Rain Ancestor has already left the primal chaos secret ground. Otherwise, we will all be killed by you. Lu Haotsong glared at Muronyu. His blood curse could be easily discovered by the Blood Rain Ancestor. Of course, it was impossible for Blood Rain Ancestor to discover Lu Haotsong in the primal chaos secret ground in the God world. He did not have the strength to do so. While being careful, Muronyu also began to cultivate. The heaven-earth yuan qi in the holy world was not very easy, but the primal chaos qi was incomparably huge. It already belonged to the holy world. It was enough for Murongyu's physical body to break through. In the end, Muronyu even decided to condense a saint body here. As long as he successfully condensed a saint body, he would break through from a false saint to a true saint. Of course, this still required a saint tribulation. It was necessary for him. In the end, Muronyu found a remote corner in the primal chaos secret ground, sat down cross-legged, and began to cultivate. In the beginning, the primal chaos qi was like a river that was constantly being absorbed by Muronyu. However, as Murongyu's speed of absorption became faster and faster, in the end, the chaotic airflow was swallowed up like a storm, like a tornado. Not long after, a huge cyclone formed in the hundreds of millions of miles around Muronyu. As more and more primal chaos qi was being devoured, the cyclone became bigger and bigger. Murongyu's physical body was rapidly becoming a saint body. What's happening over there? Why is there a sudden gale? Tens of billions of miles away from Muronyu, a group of disciples from Blood Rain Mountain was training in the primal chaos secret ground. The phenomenon caused by Muronyu was too conspicuous. They immediately discovered it. Could it be that some treasure has appeared? Hurry up and inform the sect. A disciple from Blood Rain Mountain reacted and quickly said, "Boom!" However, before he could finish his sentence, a huge fist slammed into the back of his head, sending him flying. Idiot, why inform the sect? Of course, if there's something good, it should be enjoyed by us alone. A saint said unhappily. The saint who was sent flying was about to get angry, but after hearing this, he reacted and slapped himself in the face. I'm so stupid. Then, senior brother, shall we go now? Idiot, if we don't go now, are we going to be discovered by others? As he spoke, the senior brother had already soared into the sky. At the same time that this group of disciples discovered the phenomenon, other disciples from Blood Rain Mountain in the primal chaos secret ground also discovered this scene. Suddenly, one by one, they flew overexcitedly as if they had been injected with chicken blood, thinking that a treasure had appeared. Muronyu, the people from Blood Rain Mountain are coming. Lu Haotsong noticed the disciples from Blood Rain Mountain at the beginning and reminded him at this time, "You protect me." Muronyu only left this sentence and continued to cultivate without any intention of stopping. Chapter 12:10. Lu Haozong had a bitter look on his face as he secretly cursed in his heart. Then, he began to guard Murong Yu. He also knew that Murong Yu was at a critical juncture. It would be best if he could break through the realm in one fell swoop and condense the divine body. Otherwise, it would not be good for him. This was the case for all cultivation. If one was interrupted at a critical juncture of cultivation, one would be injured or even killed. It could even cause the realm to be interrupted and stagnate. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The speed of a sage was extremely fast, and the place where Murong Yu was at was only the periphery of the chaotic secret plane. Because of this, the people who had first discovered Murong Yu quickly rushed over. However, when they saw that it was only Murong Yu and Lu Haozong, and that there weren't any treasures, they were immediately displeased. They don't seem to be from our Blood Rain Mountain. The disciple who had previously said that he would report this matter to the Blood Rain Mountain could not help but exclaim, "Bang!" What answered him was yet another gigantic fist. The disciple screamed miserably and was sent flying again. "Idiot, this secret plane is exclusive to our Blood Rain Mountain. How can there be other people besides our Blood Rain Mountain?" That senior brother said, full of anger. However, his voice stopped abruptly because he did see that Murong Yu and Lu Haozong were not wearing the disciples' uniform of the Blood Rain Mountain. If that was the case, he would not be sure that Murong Yu and Lu Haozong were not disciples of the Blood Rain Mountain. After all, the disciples of the Blood Rain Mountain did not necessarily wear their exclusive uniform. What made him sure was that he felt the power of the blood curse from a person, and it was extremely strong. It was not as simple as killing a disciple of the Blood Rain Mountain, but many people. This person was Lu Haozong. Indeed, in addition to killing the young master of the Blood Rain Mountain, Lu Haozong also killed many disciples of the Blood Rain Mountain. After that, he also killed many people in the process of being chased by the Blood Rain ancestor. Especially in the end, he directly killed his way into the Blood Rain Mountain and escaped into the chaotic secret plane. That time, blood flowed like a river in the Blood Rain Mountain. He didn't know how many Blood Rain Mountain disciples' blood curse had locked onto his body. Kill him. He is the enemy of our Blood Rain Mountain. That senior brother's eyes suddenly turned red, and he shouted loudly. From afar, he punched towards Lu Haozong. The other disciples of the Blood Rain Mountain also roared and soared into the sky, rushing towards Lu Haozong. However, they did not notice that while they were flying, their senior brother had used his fastest speed to retreat backward. He could tell that Lu Haozong was no ordinary saint. If they dared to make a move, they would be courting death. And Lu Haozong had a blood curse on his body, so he must have killed many of their disciples. Therefore, he immediately ran away. A disciple of the Blood Rain Mountain? All right, I'll collect some interest today. Lu Haozong grinned maliciously and made his move. Bang! He suddenly stretched out his big hand, and then it quickly enlarged, covering the sky like a huge, sacred mountain. Almost at the moment he made his move, the few saints who were rushing over were enveloped by an extremely strong aura of death. Immediately, their faces were filled with shock. Just as they reacted and wanted to escape, Lu Haozong's big hand had already slammed down. Bang! 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 Before the huge hand could even touch them, a violent force was already pressing down on them from all directions. All of a sudden, these people didn't even have the chance to turn around before they all exploded. In less than 2 breaths, these saints were completely obliterated, along with their souls. They couldn't be more dead. Moreover, this was because they were in the saints' realm. When a saint died, there was no vision of heaven and earth, just a group of ordinary saints. After killing these saints, Lu Haozong sneered in disdain. At the same time, he flicked his finger. Chi! A ray of sacred light tore through the void and rushed into the distance. The disciple of Blood Rain Mountain who had abandoned his companions and fled alone was still flying at this time. But suddenly, he found that he was enveloped by a strong aura of death. An extremely terrifying aura shot over at an even faster speed. Before it got close, it had already stimulated all the hair on his body to stand on end, and his skin was cracked. He was suddenly horrified and turned his head to look. He just happened to see a ray of sacred light expanding at an extremely terrifying speed. It's over. He suddenly wailed in his heart, and then the ray of sacred light caught up with him. After that, with a soft poof, he completely disappeared from the world. After killing the Blood Rain Mountain's disciple, Lu Haozong's eyes flickered with a murderous intent. Then, he took a step and disappeared on the spot. When he reappeared, he had already appeared in another group of disciples of Blood Rain Mountain who were rushing towards Murongyu. These people were flying at high speed, but they were shocked by the sudden appearance of Lu Haozong. But before they could react, Lu Haozong had already blasted a fist over. Everyone was shocked, but before they could react, an extremely terrifying power had already bombarded them. This was the power of an undead stage expert. Even if it was just a light slap, it could annihilate ordinary saints countless times, not to mention that Lu Haozong had attacked with killing intent. Bang! After a loud explosion, these people were killed. After killing these people, Lu Haozong's killing intent became even more fierce, and it could be said that his killing intent was soaring. His figure flashed, and he once again appeared in front of another group of people. Not long after, more than a dozen groups of disciples of Blood Rain Mountain, who had been attracted by the heaven and earth phenomena caused by Murongyu's cultivation, died at Lu Haozong's hands. After killing these people, the killing intent on Lu Haozong's body slowly dissipated. He had finally vented the sullen anger that had accumulated from hiding in the chaotic secret plane for so many years. However, if he wanted to be completely stingy, he had to kill Ancestor Blood Rain. However, that was impossible now. I don't know how many people of Blood Rain Mountain are in the chaotic secret plane. These people can't be killed. Perhaps the higher-ups of Blood Rain Mountain already know about these heaven and earth phenomena. Once they are discovered, their profound sage-level ancestors will be alarmed, and that won't be good. Lu Haozong returned to the place where Murongyu was cultivating. Looking at Murongyu, who was still cultivating, he frowned. He didn't care about those below the profound sage realm. Even if they were powerhouses of the 9th stage, he was confident that he could kill them. However, if they were profound sages, the gap between them would be huge. In particular, if Ancestor Blood Rain was alarmed, Lu Haozong might not be able to escape. I don't know when this kid will be able to break through. Lu Haozong looked at Murongyu, frowning even more. Sure enough, it didn't take long for more people to fly over. Moreover, in addition to the lowest level sages, powerhouses of the Great Sage Realm were beginning to appear. Moreover, he believed that it wouldn't be long before powerhouses of the Undead Realm, and even the Profound Sage Realm appeared. Since Murongyu was still in the process of breaking through, Lu Haozong could only choose to forcibly hold on. He killed all the disciples of Blood Rain Mountain. For him, he couldn't wait to immediately slaughter everyone in Blood Rain Mountain. Therefore, he didn't have any psychological burden when killing these people. What? Someone is going on a killing spree in the chaotic secret plane, and it's not someone from our Blood Rain Mountain? Finally, the higher-ups of Blood Rain Mountain learned of this news. Therefore, powerhouses of the Undead Realm rushed into the chaotic secret plane one after another. There were even several profound sage-level ancestors that had entered the chaotic secret plane. It's over, powerhouses are coming. When Lu Haozong killed an Undead Realm sage with his bare hands, his face suddenly changed. Kid, when will you be able to break through? The higher-ups of Blood Rain Mountain have been alarmed, and powerhouses are coming over. My strength hasn't recovered yet, and I'm afraid that I can't even resist a 9th stage undead expert. If it's a profound sage, I'll definitely lose. Lu Haozong's somewhat anxious voice sounded in Murongyu's ears. Murongyu felt extremely helpless. He was about to break through, and was only one step away. But this last step was something that he couldn't cross. Therefore, he didn't know when he would be able to break through. Hold on a little longer. If I really can't break through, we can only leave here. Murongyu felt very helpless. He didn't want to leave here. After all, the chaotic chi flow here was already at the level of the Holy World's origin chi, which was a great supplement for him. If he left here, where would he find a place with such rich world's origin chi? If he left here, he really didn't know when he would be able to break through to the saint body realm. After all, even with such rich world's origin chi, he still couldn't break through, let alone in other places. Try to break through as soon as possible. Otherwise, we may stay here forever, Lu Haotsong said in a deep voice, and at the same time, turned around and stepped into the distance. Not long after, he hovered in the void. Not far in front of him, a group of people were looking at him with murderous intent. 3 undead realm sages and a profound sage ancestor. Lu Haotsong frowned slightly and bitterly smiled at his heart. Who are you? Why are you killing in my Blood Rain Mountain's secret plane? The profound sage ancestor looked at Lu Haotsong and felt that he was somewhat familiar. However, the rich power of the blood curse on Lu Haotsong's body made him frown. Ancestor, why are you asking him so much? Wait for me to directly kill him. An undead realm sage looked at Lu Haotsong with anger and murderous intent. He stepped forward and was about to attack. Wait. The profound sage ancestor stopped the undead realm sage. His gaze swept past Lu Haotsong and looked at Murongyu, who was cultivating behind him. False sage? He was startled at first. Then, his expression changed wildly. This was because he found that Murongyu could actually absorb the chaotic chi flow. This was a power that even he couldn't absorb, but a false sage could? How could he not be shocked? Chapter 12:11. Legend has it that only those who have reached a certain realm can barely refine primal chaos energy. This kid is only a false sage, but he can already refine primal chaos energy? Doesn't that mean that his future achievements will be extremely high? This profound immortal looked at Murongyu, who was cultivating in the distance, and fell into deep thought. In the holy world, sages could only absorb the origin energy of heaven and earth. Primal chaos energy was a very high-level existence. Legend has it that only those top powerhouses could refine and absorb primal chaos energy. People at that level were legends. This profound sage had only heard of people at that level in the holy world, but had never seen them. Now that he saw that Murongyu could devour primal chaos energy, he immediately believed that Murongyu might have reached that legendary realm. His mind immediately began to work. If he could also absorb primal chaos energy, wouldn't he also reach that legendary realm? Suddenly, this profound sage became excited. How could he not be excited? With his aptitude, it was already very heaven-defying for him to reach the ancient sage realm. Moreover, it still depended on a miracle. Without a miracle, he could only stay in the profound sage realm. He immediately shouted, "Kill him and capture that false sage for me." He decided to capture Murongyu and force him to reveal his cultivation method. Before the profound sage's voice fell, the 3 imperishable stage powerhouses suddenly jumped out and rushed towards Lu Haotsong. As for Murongyu, who was cultivating, they simply ignored him. Even if he broke through, he was only an ordinary sage. Could he escape from their hands? Looking at the 3 imperishable stage sages rushing over, Lu Haotsong smiled disdainfully. The 3 imperishable stage sages had not reached the 9th rank, and none of them had even reached the 8th rank. Even if they had the advantage in numbers, they were no threat to him. What made him vigilant was that profound sage. Although that guy's realm was not very high, he was still much stronger than him. Not to mention that his strength was far from his peak state. Scram! Lu Haotsong roared out. He took a step forward and arrived before one of the imperishable saints. He extended his hand and slammed it down on the person. Bang! The imperishable realm expert didn't even have time to react before being sent flying by Lu Haotsong's palm. However, Lu Haotsong originally wanted to kill this person. However, the attacks of the other 2 saints had also arrived. Of course, he could kill the immortal stage saint just by spitting power from his palm. However, he would definitely be heavily injured by the other 2. It was not worth it at all. Thus, at the last moment, he pulled back and retreated, avoiding the attacks of the two people. Trash. Seeing that the sage was sent flying, the profound sage coldly snorted in displeasure. The undead sage saint blushed because he had just said that he had killed Lu Haotsong not long ago. This was a great loss of face. The two immortal stage saints quickly closed in on Murongyu, and one of them said in a deep voice, "Kill yourself." However, while they were talking, it didn't stop attacking. Streams of incomparably terrifying power continuously burst out from their hands, soaring to the heavens. Under the impact of their powers, the violent, chaotic airflow was directly crushed into pieces. Layers of ripples appeared in the void as a result of the bombardment. However, although they were all immortal stage experts, the void of the holy world was countless times stronger than that of the divine world. Even profound sages couldn't break the void and create spatial turbulence. Even so, their momentum was monstrous, covering hundreds of millions of miles. It shattered and annihilated everything. The disciples of Blood Rain Mountain who hadn't reached the immortal stage had already retreated far away. With their realm, once they were brushed by Lu Haotsong's power, they would immediately be crushed to pieces. Kill myself? What a joke. Lu Haotsong couldn't help but sneer. His body, which was originally retreating, instantly turned into a charging gaze. Have a taste of my 10,000 kings slash. As he spoke, Lu Haotsong suddenly slashed out with two hand blades. Chi. Two hand blades condensed from incomparably great power suddenly slashed out. Against the wind, they expanded in an instant and, like two sacred mountains, swiftly and violently chopped down on the two saints. A terrifying aura burst out, and the sky seemed to be cut in half. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The moment these two hand blades appeared, the disciples of Blood Rain Mountain, who were hundreds of millions of miles away, suddenly changed their expressions. This was because at this moment, terrifying saber chi tore through the void, slashing toward their physical bodies and even their souls. Their hearts trembled. Their souls were also trembling. At the first moment, these people quickly retreated. They had no choice but to retreat. The saber chi was becoming more and more terrifying. Their souls were in pain, as if they would be cut into pieces at any time. As for the two immortal stage saints, they felt it more intensely than those people. A strong aura of death shrouded their hearts. At this moment, they knew that if they couldn't block this so-called 10,000 king slash, they would definitely die. Flying rainbow scatter. One of the saints suddenly roared. He clasped his hands together and then suddenly released them. Suddenly, a seven-colored rainbow burst out, like hundreds of millions of sharp arrows, shooting toward one of the hand blades and Lu Haotsong. Wherever it passed, the void shattered. The ear-piercing sound of something breaking through the air spread far and wide, shattering the eardrums of many disciples of Blood Rain Mountain in the distance and causing them to bleed from their 7 orifices. At the same time, the other immortal stage saint roared and flicked his finger. Suddenly, a red light shot out from his fingertip and collided with each other in the void. Then, it suddenly exploded into a cloud of blood mist, like the hand blade that slashed down from the sky, wanting to smash it into pieces. Looking at it, the blood mist was a long sword the size of a pinky finger. Small tricks. Let's see the power of the 10,000 kings slash. Lu Haotsong stood where he was and sneered. Boom, boom. The attacks from both sides rapidly bombarded each other in the void. After an earth-shattering explosion, they all exploded into pieces. Puff, puff. The magic treasures and divine weapons of the two immortal stage saints seemed to have been shattered. Their minds were instantly injured, and they spat out blood. On the other hand, Lu Haotsong acted as if nothing had happened. Chi. In fact, the so-called 10,000 king slash by Lu Haotsong was not just two hand blades. Although the strength of the two hand blades was very terrifying, the most terrifying thing was what happened next. After shattering the divine weapons of the two saints, the hand blades that were slashing down from the void immediately exploded. However, the explosion did not dissipate. Instead, it turned into two different shapes. Suddenly, each hand blade turned into hundreds of millions of miniature hand blades the size of a pinky finger. Like a storm, they covered the entire sky and pierced through the firmament, carrying a terrifying aura that could destroy heaven and earth. A strong aura of death instantly filled the hearts of the three immortal stage experts. At this moment, they were shocked to find that they were surrounded by miniature hand blades that were shooting toward them from all directions, blocking all their escape routes. Moreover, the power of these hand blades was even more terrifying than before, causing their souls to tremble. There was no way out. They could only take it head-on. At this moment, the three of them quickly rushed to one side and then exploded with their strongest power, jointly holding up a huge energy shield. At the same time, their bodies shone with divine light as they took out all kinds of low-tier divine weapons. They had to do this because the 10,000 Kings slash gave them too much pressure. If they were not careful, they would be killed. So what if they were in the immortal stage? It was not like they could not be killed. As for why they did not take out their high-tier divine weapons, that was because they did not have any high-tier divine weapons. In the holy world, even low-tier divine weapons were very rare. Bang, bang, bang. The 10,000 Kings slashed out. Every moment, the divine weapons that the saints took out were hit by hundreds of thousands or even tens of millions of small hand blades. These low-tier divine weapons could not withstand it all and began to explode after an instant of impact. Even if some of them could withstand it, the impact caused the minds of the three saints to tremble and their souls to tremble as they vomited blood again and again. Moreover, the most terrifying thing about the 10,000 King slash was that after a few rounds of attack, those small hand blades would explode. Once they exploded, the power that erupted was more than 100 times stronger than the hand blades. Therefore, the shields of these saints could not withstand it and were in imminent danger. Once the shields were broken, their bodies would be attacked by the 10,000 King slash. Ancestor, save us. At this time, the three of them were finally frightened and asked the profound sage powerhouse for help. If that profound sage old ancestor didn't make a move, they would all die here. The profound sage ancestor had been indifferently watching the battle of Lu Haotsong's group of four, as if he did not want to intervene. But at this time, his expression changed. There were not many immortal stage existences in the Blood Rain Mountain. If one died, there would be one less, and that was a loss they could not bear. Therefore, the immortal stage ancestor took action. He let out a cold snort and stretched out his hand. His 5 fingers spread open as he grabbed at the hundreds of millions of tiny hand blades. Bang, bang, bang. Before the big hand arrived, the power that erupted from the 10,000 Kings slash caused the small hand blades to explode one after another. In fact, the big hand had just stretched out, and the hundreds of millions of small hand blades of the 10,000 Kings slash had almost all exploded. This was the difference between the profound sage realm and the immortal stage. 10,000 Kings slash. 10,000 Kings slash. 10,000 Kings slash. Lu Haotsong's expression changed slightly, and he repeatedly slashed out with both hands, creating terrifying hand blades that slashed at the profound sage ancestor. Stop for me. The profound sage ancestor sneered and grabbed at the air with his big hand. Suddenly, bang! The power that Lu Haotsong continuously struck out was directly crushed. Lu Haotsong's mind was also injured because of this, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. In fact, a powerful force even sent him flying. Chapter 12:12. Unable to withstand a single blow. This was the gap between the imperishable stage and the profound sage stage. Not to mention that Lu Haotsong was far from recovering to his peak strength. Even if he recovered to the peak of the 9th stage, imperishable stage, he still wouldn't be the opponent of this profound sage old ancestor. The gap between their realms was too big. However, if he was at his peak, Even if he wasn't the old ancestor's opponent, he definitely wouldn't have been defeated in a single blow. Insignificant skill. You actually dared to kill people of my Blood Rain Mountain in the chaotic secret plane. You are really tired of living. The profound sage ancestor of Blood Rain Mountain looked at Lu Haotsong with disdain, his face full of contempt. However, although he despised Lu Haotsong, his speed wasn't fast, and his killing intent didn't diminish. He took a step forward, passing through endless time and space, and appeared in front of Lu Haotsong. He stretched out his big hand again, his 5 fingers spread open, and fiercely shot out. The void was instantly blown up, and a terrifying aura that could destroy heaven and earth erupted. The 5 fingers suddenly appeared above Lu Haotsong's head and violently smashed down. Lu Haotsong was obviously surprised by the speed of the profound sage old ancestor. Moreover, he was still in the process of being sent flying. However, he was an imperishable stage powerhouse after all, and his reaction was naturally not slow. With a thought, a holy light burst out from his body and soared into the sky. The power of the meridians in his body was quickly mobilized by him, crazily rushing forward like a torrent. In an instant, Lu Haotsong's body swelled up. This was because a large amount of power had burst out in his body. 10,000 Emperor Strike. Gathering all his power in his right hand, Lu Haotsong roared and once again struck out with one of his killing moves. A huge hand blade fiercely chopped out, its power shocking the world, wanting to split the sky. However, in the face of this terrifying blow, the profound sage old ancestor of Blood Rain Mountain just sneered. His 5 fingers violently smashed down, directly grabbing the rapidly enlarging handblade. Then, the power of his 5 fingers gushed out, and with a bang, the handblade was directly crushed. Puff! Lu Haotsong spat out another mouthful of blood. After the profound sage old ancestor crushed the 10,000 Emperor Strike, his 5 fingers didn't linger in the air, and once again smashed down. Lu Haotsong was shocked and furious. He unleashed his strongest attack and slashed out again and again. However, the disparity in strength was too great. The power he unleashed was simply unable to withstand a single blow. Ghostly Shadow. Lu Haotsong was about to be crushed by the profound sage old ancestor's claw. But at this moment, he roared in his heart, and his figure suddenly scattered, turning into numerous phantoms. Then his speed skyrocketed, and he retreated explosively. Puff! The moment he retreated, the void where he was originally was crushed. The endless chaotic airflow was directly annihilated. Cough, cough! Lu Haotsong coughed up blood again. Just now, he had suddenly used the demonic shadow to increase his speed and avoid the profound sage old ancestor's killing blow. However, the disparity in strength between the two sides was too great. While he was retreating, his body was still swept by the aftermath of the profound sage old ancestor's power. Looking from afar, Lu Haotsong's entire abdomen had been torn apart, and his internal organs were exposed. It was very frightening. Of course, these injuries were nothing to an imperishable stage powerhouse like him. He only needed to weigh some power to restore himself to his peak. However, his mind was seriously injured, and it was not an exaggeration to say that he had been seriously injured. Seeing Lu Haotsong avoid his killing blow at the critical moment of life and death, the profound sage old ancestor of the Blood Rain Mountain was obviously very surprised. Unfortunately, if you were a friend, I would appreciate you very much. However, you killed so many disciples of my Blood Rain Mountain. You deserve to die, the profound sage old ancestor said indifferently, and then his big hand once again grabbed Lu Haotsong. At this time, Lu Haotsong's mind had been seriously injured, and he couldn't even display his previous strength. Therefore, he could only choose to retreat. In fact, Lu Haotsong originally didn't want to fight with this profound sage old ancestor. He knew that he was not his opponent. It was just that the other party was too fast, and as soon as he attacked, he was forced to fight back. If he hadn't fought back, he would have died long ago. Glancing at Murongyu, who was still breaking through, Lu Haotsong's figure flickered, and he shot to the other side. He didn't want the power of the battle to affect Murong-Yu. For a friend, Lu Haotsong being able to do this was already very kind. Murong-Yu, regardless of whether you succeed in breaking through or not, you'd better stop cultivating immediately and leave here. Otherwise, both of us will die here today, Lu Haotsong roared to Murong-Yu via sound transmission. Bang! At the same time, the Blood Rain Mountain's old ancestor punched Lu Haotsong. Although Lu Haotsong's reaction was extremely fast, and he avoided most of the power of the attack. However, that small amount of power almost caused his entire body to explode. He was seriously injured once again. Oomph. The profound Saint Old Ancestor snorted angrily, and a touch of displeasure flashed across his face. This was because Lu Haotsong had dodged his several attacks, which made him very angry. Blood Rain Cut. The profound Saint Old Ancestor was furious, and he used a combat skill for the first time. A blood-red light gushed out from his palm. Then, it quickly condensed into a huge saber the size of a mountain in the sky. Cut! Following the profound Saint Old Ancestor's roar, the huge saber fiercely slashed down. Chi! The void seemed to be cut in half, and the saber locked onto Lu Haotsong with a terrifying aura that could destroy heaven and earth and slash down. At this moment, Lu Haotsong's face suddenly changed. The power of this saber was shocking, and he absolutely couldn't resist it. Moreover, he knew that this so-called blood rain cut not only cut the body, but also the soul. It mainly targeted the soul. If Lu Haotsong's body was cut in half by this blood rain cut, then his soul would also be cut in half. At that time, he would really die. Run! Lu Haotsong was horrified. He didn't have any sacred tools on him, and he simply couldn't resist this blood rain cut with his strength. Therefore, he could only escape. However, how could the profound Saint Old Ancestor's full-strength slash be so easy to avoid? When Lu Haotsong wanted to escape, he was shocked to find that it was as if he had fallen into a quagmire, and it was difficult for him to move. However, the blood rain cut suddenly accelerated and slashed down. I'm finished. At this moment, this was the only thought that appeared in Lu Haotsong's mind. He knew that he couldn't avoid this attack. However, just as he was in despair, a voice sounded. Spatial barrier, spatial shackle, spatial storm, spatial cut, spatial shield. At the same time, Lu Haotsong suddenly found that there were layers of ripples in the void around him. In fact, there were even streams of power acting on his body, seemingly protecting him. In addition, the force that was binding his physical body also disappeared. Lu Haotsong was overjoyed, and he instantly unleashed his strongest attack, his figure fiercely rushing forward. Boom! Just as he flew out, the blood rain slash had already slashed down. After an earth-shattering sound, a huge crater with an area of hundreds of millions of miles appeared on the ground. It was so deep that the bottom couldn't be seen. The terrifying impact swept out, and wherever it passed, the void shattered, and the earth was razed to the ground. Although Lu Haotsong managed to escape first, the shockwaves of the attack still landed on his body. Half of his body was instantly annihilated. However, it was his soul that made him cry out in pain. A small half of his soul was shattered. His soul was seriously injured. Lu Haotsong felt bitter in his heart, but his speed didn't stop, and he continued to fly forward. Don't resist. Just as he was flying, Murong-Yu's voice sounded in his ear. Then, he felt a powerful suction force wrap around him. Lu Haotsong didn't resist, and with a swish, he disappeared. Disappeared? What's going on? Seeing Lu Haotsong disappear into thin air, the profound sage ancestor and the others of the Blood Rain Mountain all showed a touch of suspicion on their faces. Ancestor, that pseudo-sage, is also gone. At this moment, an undead stage sage turned his head and glanced at the side where Murong-Yu was cultivating, and found that Murong-Yu had already left at some point. They all escaped. The profound sage ancestor's face changed greatly, and he instantly became gloomy. Even with him making a move, an undead sage and a pseudo-sage actually escaped? How could he have any face left? In particular, Morongyu could absorb the power of primal chaos. He was someone he must take down. Trash! The profound sage ancestor angrily shouted. It was unknown whether he was scolding himself or others. Ancestor, what should we do now? They actually escaped, and where did they enter the secret plane? An undead sage walked up and asked. Search. Even if you have to dig 3 feet into the secret plane, you must find them for me. At the same time, guard the exit. The profound sage ancestor's face was gloomy, and he was furious, feeling extremely humiliated. Thus, many disciples of the Blood Rain Mountain began to search for Morongyu and Lu Haochen in the primal chaos secret plane. Then, where were Morongyu and Lu Haochen at this time? Had they left the secret plane, or were they still inside? Morongyu and Lu Haochen hadn't left the primal chaos secret plane, but they were still inside, but in the Hichu, Luoshu world. Old Lu, are you okay? Looking at Lu Haotsong, who was sitting cross-legged on the ground, recuperating, Morongyu asked somewhat worriedly. Lu Haotsong slowly opened his eyes, and his face was full of a helpless smile. I won't die for the time being. However, the injuries to my mind and soul are too serious. I'm afraid it will take a very long time for them to recover. Now, I have to hurry up and heal, otherwise my soul will have sequelae. Morongyu furrowed his brows. His injuries are that serious? Let me see if I can help you heal. As he spoke, his life force madly poured into Lu Haotsong's body. Under the treatment of a life force, Lu Haotsong's physical injuries quickly recovered. In less than half a day, he was completely healed. However, his mind and soul didn't improve in the slightest. How could the soul of a sage be so easily healed? Moreover, this was precisely why Morongyu didn't erase the blood curse in Lu Haotsong's soul. He didn't have the ability to do so now. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.